Chapter 13:18. In the box, as long as it was a question related to the game, the central hub of the box would be able to provide an answer. It was precisely because of this that you too, who was connected to the central hub of the box, became so persuasive. If there were truly loopholes in the rules of the game of grace that Pest used, Black Rabbit, who was connected to the central hub of the box, would be able to obtain the truth from there. Even though Pest clearly knew this, she still had a fearless appearance. This proved that there were indeed no flaws in the rules of the game. However, even if this was the case, Black Rabbit still had to follow the procedure. After all, Black Rabbit's authority to make a decision did not mean that there was a problem with the rules of the game. Instead, when fighting against the Demon King, using this authority to stall for time was of the utmost importance. What they needed to do next was to see how far they would be able to negotiate with Pest during the meeting. Due to the hostile relationship between the two sides, they naturally had to do their best to make the rules less favorable to the Demon King's side. Thinking like this, Black Rabbit could only choose to believe in Reverse 16 Nights and Ren's negotiation ability. He closed his eyes and his long rabbit ears began to tremble. After a long time, Black Rabbit opened his eyes. As expected, he smiled bitterly and said, "We have received the central hub of the box. I've already received the reply from the central command of the Hecate. The game this time indeed has no flaws or irregularities. Lord White Yiksha's seal is also formed using proper methods." Reverse 16 Nights, Ren, Shadora, Mandela and the others immediately grew silent. "That is a natural result," Pest said in an extremely calm manner. "In that case, the rules will remain as they are. I wish to discuss the date when the game will restart." "Discuss the date." Everyone was stunned. Discuss the date. In other words, Pest did not plan to restart the game immediately. What kind of joke was this? Black Rabbit had made a decision to make a decision in order to stall for time. For Pest to take the initiative to not restart the game immediately, wasn't that the same as giving the competitors time to solve the puzzle? Could it be that Pest was not afraid of the game's victory condition being solved? Before the crowd of competitors, Pest acted as if she didn't know what she had just said. Slowly, she opened her mouth to speak. She slowly said, "I wish to ask the referee, what is the slowest possible time for the game to restart?" "Slowest. Black Rabbit said with a confused expression. Most likely, it can be delayed to a month from now." "Is that so?" Pest suddenly smiled. Then in a month, however, before Pest could finish her words, 16 Nights Reversal and Ren spoke at the same time. "Wait. Please wait." The sudden interruption stunned Black Rabbit, Shadora, Mandela, and the others. "What's wrong?" Pest raised her eyes slightly and looked at 16 Nights and Ren. "Don't you want time?" "I'll give it to you, all right." Hearing this, 16 Nights and Ren looked at each other. After receiving 16 Nights' signal, Ren nodded and summoned his courage to look at Pest. "According to the information provided by the members of our community, you should be the Demon King Pestis who controls the Black Death, right?" "That's right." Pest glanced in Noah's direction and calmly nodded. "Is there a problem?" Of course, Ren couldn't help but become serious. "Speaking of the Black Death, it is the most terrifying plague of the 14th century. Since you are the Demon King who controls the Black Death, it should be a very simple matter for you to have the Black Death enter everyone's bodies, right?" Everyone was shocked. If that was truly the case, then Pest's purpose in deliberately delaying the restart of the game was clear. One must know that the Black Death's incubation period was at least 2 days. If they were to wait until a month from now to restart the game, then all the people here would have died from the corrosion of the Black Death's virus. If that was the case, not only would Pest be able to win the game effortlessly, but all the people here would also die. Thinking of this, everyone's expressions became ugly. "You've truly made a neither good nor bad move," speckled lowly, 16 nights reversal said with a mocking tone. Are you not worried that we will be able to solve the puzzle of the victory condition within a month and, by luck, allow one of us to survive and clear the game 1 month from now? If it was before the trial authority was activated, then that might be possible. A malicious smile appeared on Pest's face. However, now that the trial authority has been activated, that is no longer possible. What? 16 Nights Reversal frowned as he looked at Black Rabbit. What's going on? In an ordinary bestowment game, if there is more than one victory condition, then one will only need to complete one of the victory conditions to clear the game. Black Rabbit bit his lips because of the unexpected unfavorable situation. However, once the trial authority is activated, the rules will be changed. Miss Pest is completely capable of demanding that all the victory conditions be met. 16 Nights Reversal's expression sunk. This time around, there were 2 victory conditions for the participants. One was to defeat the game leader of the organizer. The other was to break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance. In other words, if one wanted to complete all the victory conditions, in addition to solving the puzzle of the second victory condition, one would also need to defeat Pest 1 month from now. After being tormented by the Black Death for an entire month, even if one didn't die, one would be left with half a life. By the way, although our community has yet to establish a foothold, according to our evaluation, even I can reach the 5-digit level, Pest mocked with a tone as if victory was already in her grasp. Even so, you all still dare to claim that you have a method to defeat me after being tormented by the Black Death for an entire month? Everyone was rendered speechless for a moment. Right at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded. Of course. This voice was filled with a matter-of-fact tone. 16 Nights Reversal, Ren, Sandora, Mandela and even Black Rabbit became spirited. They turned around and looked toward the source of the voice. Will and Ladding were shocked. They also looked toward the source of the voice. As for Pest, her eyes flickered with a dangerous glint. She looked toward the entrance. There, Noah looked up and said, "Don't you dare say that. There is no longer any possibility of us losing this game." Those words caused the expressions of everyone present to change. However, while the participants had pleasantly surprised expressions, the organizers had gloomy and irritable expressions. This was especially true for Pest. She looked at Noah with an extremely displeased expression. "I truly wish to ask you this. Why are you so confident?" "There are 3 reasons." Under the gazes of everyone present, Noah raised 3 fingers before Pest. 1. Even if everyone else were to die from the Black Death, nothing would happen to me. To explain it in terms that you all can understand, it is because I was born with the gift of being unaffected by any negative energy. This includes viruses and curses. 1 month from now, I will still be able to participate in the competition. 2. I've solved all the puzzles of the second victory condition in this game of grace. 3. You, the demon king of the Black Death, are no match for me. When these 3 sentences resounded throughout the entire hall, the atmosphere of the entire space became hostile. You. Rage appeared on Wells and Ladding's faces. They abruptly stood up from their seats. Provoked by this, Black Rabbit, Shadora, Mandela and the others also stood up. Only Pest stared fixedly at Noah. Finally, a cold glint appeared in her eyes. That was the expression of Pest's killing intent toward Noah. Originally, Pest did not display any true killing intent toward anyone. The reason for that was very simple. It was because only Pest, Wells and Ladding remained in the Grim Grimoire Hamon. As the leader of the community, one of the reasons why Pest started this game of grace was to have talented individuals join her community. That was why the term subduing was used as the victory condition for this game of grace. After Noah displayed sufficient talent, Pest extended an olive branch to Noah. Because of that, Pest did not display any killing intent toward anyone. However, it was different now. Chapter 13:19. There's no possibility of losing. At first glance, this sentence sounded like a boast. However, if one connected the 3 reasons Noah mentioned earlier and the 2 victory conditions for the game of grace that Pest had organized using her authority as the organizer, one could understand why Noah would say those words. Pest had 3 main advantages. First, she could change the rules of the game through the discussion and delay the start of the game to 1 month later. Second, she could also change the rules through the discussion and make it so that 2 victory conditions had to be met in order to clear the game. Third, she could inject the Black Death virus into the bodies of the participants, making it so that none of the participants could guarantee that they would be able to survive 1 month later and clear the restart of the game. Under such circumstances, even if the puzzle of the second victory condition was solved, the participants here would not be able to guarantee that they would be able to survive until 1 month later and continue participating in the game. Even if they were able to survive, they would only be able to fulfill the second victory condition. After being tormented by the Black Death to the point where they were half dead, defeating the Demon King after 1 month was no longer a question of whether it was difficult or not. Instead, it was a question of whether it was realistic. After all, the incubation period of the Black Death was only 2 short days. 1 month was more than enough time for everyone here to die. Even if they were able to survive, it would already be a miracle if even one of them could survive until 1 month later. That was why Pest was so certain of her victory. Originally, the discussion and resolution was to buy time for the participants to solve the puzzle of the Demon King game. However, Pest's infusion of the Black Death virus into the participants during the game had completely turned the situation around. However, Noah's existence had completely shattered Pest's 3 advantages. That was because even if everyone here were to die from the Black Death, nothing would happen to Noah. He would still be able to participate in the game 1 month later. If Noah had truly solved the puzzle of the second victory condition of this game of grace, then 1 month later, Noah would be able to easily complete one of the 2 victory conditions. As for the remaining victory condition, Noah had also mentioned that he would not be tormented by the Black Death virus. Pest was no match for him. Such resolute and decisive words caused the atmosphere of the entire space to change completely. As for Pest, she was staring at Noah with an extremely heavy gaze. Her gaze gave off a deep pressure. The pressure that only belonged to the Demon King made Joyuen Osaka and Hiroi Yayoi feel suffocated. As for Shadora, Mandela, and Ren, their backs were drenched in cold sweat. Among all the people present, only 16 knights maintained a calm expression. He looked at Noah and exclaimed in surprise. "You've solved the puzzle. I think you should have noticed it too, right?" Noah asked instead of answering. The phrase, "break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance" itself. Hearing Noah's words, everyone was stunned. "I only noticed a part of it." 16 knights shrugged. After all, the word shatter in the sentence "shatter the fake inheritance" makes one feel that the inheritance here is not some kind of real item, so it can be used to shatter it. After saying those words, 16 knights suddenly smiled. For example, the stained glass that was displayed together with the inscription that recorded the disappearance of 130 children in Hamel Town. Hearing those words, Will and Ladding's expressions changed slightly. It also caused the eyes of Ren, Shadora, Mandela, and the other participants to light up. In this fire dragon's birth ceremony, many artworks were displayed as well. It would not be strange at all if there were stained glass among these artworks. Since it was stained glass, the stained glass would definitely not have the same stained glass. Ren immediately asked after noticing this. In other words, the phrase, "break the false inheritance and establish the true inheritance," means that we have to find out which stained glass is real and which stained glass is fake. Correct, 16 knights snapped his fingers. Then, he spread his hands helplessly. It's just that I haven't determined which piece of stained glass is real and which is fake. Before the meeting, I did some research and found out that there are more than 100 pieces of stained glass that will be displayed at the fire dragon's birth ceremony. More than 100 stained glass. Everyone looked at each other. However, soon, 16 Knights put on his arrogant smile again. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Noah. Since you said that you have solved the riddle, it means that you already know how to distinguish the stained glass from the fake ones, right? I only noticed it at the end. Noah smiled bitterly. Because you first noticed the word shatter, but I noticed the word inheritance first. In the world of the box, there were all kinds of myths and legends. They were the inheritances of the famous Asura gods and Buddhas. Once, in the world of the God Slayer, Noah was familiar with almost all the myths and legends in order to make the clone of the warrior able to be used against any god at any time. So, it was different from 16 Knights. After realizing that Pest and the others might not all come from the fairy tale, the Piper of Hamel, Noah, who was familiar with all kinds of myths and legends, including fairy tales, noticed that something was wrong. If you think about it carefully, it's actually very easy to understand. Noah looked straight at Pest, who was silent. Undoubtedly, in the real Hamel town, the inscription that recorded the disappearance of 130 children was dated to 1284. However, the Black Death started to spread after 1350. The reason why it became the cause of the deaths of those children was because the Black Death after the 14th century was made into the fairy tale, the Piper of Hamel. After hearing Noah's words, everyone was shocked. In other words, the period when the Black Death was at its peak did not match the era recorded in the inscription of Hamel Town. Now that I think about it, the Black Death, that is, you, Pestis, shouldn't be a demon summoned from the Pied Piper of Hamel. Noah said to Pest, who had a gloomy expression. Then, he looked at Will and Ladding, who had a gloomy expression on their faces. If that's the case, I can't help but suspect that the others might be the real deal. In the original inheritance and inscription, the character of the Piper who manipulates rats did not appear. It was only after the 1500s, when the Black Death reached its peak, that the rats and the Piper who manipulates rats appeared in the Piper of Hamel. In other words, Rattan the rat catcher is also a fake. Ladding's expression immediately turned ugly. The storm after that seems to be the real deal. However, the storm is a natural disaster that can appear anywhere. It has nothing to do with the inheritance of the Piper of Hamel. Noah glanced at Will. Therefore, among the four of you, only Weezer, who is also the Weezer River, fits the description of the original, the Piper of Hamel. After all, the inscription of Hamel Town states that vanish near the hills. The hills here refer to the hills adjacent to the Weezer River. TSK. Will was speechless. 16 Knights the Reverse's eyes grew brighter and brighter. In the end, he finally revealed a smile. So that's how it is. Everything makes sense now. As long as the images of the rats, the Black Death, and the storm are fake in the stained glass, they should be shattered. Among the remaining stained glass, there should only be one stained glass that doesn't have these three elements. As long as we can find it, we will be able to solve the riddle of breaking the fake inheritance and establishing the real inheritance. 16 Knights the Reverse laughed loudly. Well done, young man. While 16 Knights the Reverse laughed loudly, Joyuki, Hiroyuki, Ren, Shadora, Mandela, and the others revealed joyful expressions. As for Pest, Will, Ladding and the others, they all entered a state of complete silence. Chapter 13:20. The puzzle had been solved. However, that was understandable. The reason for that was because Pest had encountered two true monsters in this game of grace. One was Noah, who had to travel through various unfamiliar worlds. In order to understand the backgrounds of various worlds and survive in these worlds, he placed great importance on information. That was why he had read all kinds of books. The other was an ordinary human. However, he possessed an extremely terrifying talent. Not only was he born with a gift that not even the Asura gods and Buddhas could match, but he was also surprisingly smart, the 16 Nights of Reversal. Under such circumstances, even if only one of them was present, it would only be a matter of time before they unraveled the truth behind the inheritance of the Piper of Hamel. Not to mention, both of them were present. Combining the inscriptions recorded in the real Hamel town and the various knowledge from the Grimm's fairy tales, it was only a matter of time before the puzzle of Pest's game was solved. Of course, if they only solved one of the game's victory conditions, they would not be able to obtain victory. Even if you two solved the puzzle, so what? Pest's delicate face did not waver in the slightest. She merely looked at Noah, who was telling them the answer to the puzzle without any hesitation. She spoke in an extremely calm manner. Right now, we are still in the process of deliberating. Changing the rules is still feasible. My game does not have any flaws. Yet, you all forcefully stopped it. Thus, I am completely capable of requesting to change the rules of the game. As long as we delay the game to a month later, everyone here will die. Pest looked at Noah with an expression filled with displeasure. At that time, even if you are the only one who is fine, what can you do? What can I do? Noah curled his lips into a smile. His pitch-black eyes looked straight at Pest. Didn't I say it already? You are no match for me. After Noah announced the answer to the puzzle, the atmosphere that had turned hostile was successfully ignited by these words. Don't be too arrogant, stinking brat. Wilhelm's entire body was emitting a berserk anger. Do you think you can defeat the Demon King alone? That's why I hate humans. All of them are so arrogant. Compared to humans who don't know what's good for them, those rats are much cuter. Latine had a flirtatious smile on her face, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. Right? Master. However, Pest simply ignored Lating's question. Instead, she looked to Noah with an expressionless face. After a while, she suddenly smiled. Undoubtedly, that smile looked quite cute, but it gave people a creepy feeling. With such a smile on her face, Pest lightly opened her mouth. Are you serious? Noah did not reply. He merely shot a glance at Pest. There was no change in his expression at all. Just like that, Noah and Pest looked at each other as if there was no one else present. This caused the entire space to be filled with a pressure that caused one's heart to contract. Seeing Noah confronting the Demon King without showing any signs of weakness, Kiyoshi, Haruhibiari, Ren, Shadora, and Mandela all had a drop of sweat rolling down their cheeks. As they clearly knew what kind of offensive gifts Noah possessed, they naturally did not think that Noah was boasting. Rather, it would be better to say that Noah possessed many divine spark-grade weapons. Even Mandela gave him a high evaluation of being able to rank in the 4 digits. Naturally, no one felt that Noah would lose to a Demon King with 5 digits. However, the problem was that Pest was not merely a Demon King with 5 digits. She was also an existence that controlled the Black Death. In this outer sect, who knew how many people had been injected with the Black Death virus by this Demon King, and their lives were hanging by their necks. Even if Noah was able to defeat Pest in a month's time, the people here would most likely all be dead by then. If that was the case, what was the point? It was impossible for Noah not to understand this. However, Noah had still provoked Pest to such an extent. He had even solved the game's riddle right in front of her. Wasn't this the same as deliberately angering her? Once the enemy was completely angered, there would be no room for negotiation. It was really possible that Pest would be forced to delay the start of the game to a month's time. At that time, it would truly be over. Thinking up to this point, everyone grew anxious. There was only one person who could remain calm. That person was none other than 16 Knights. The eyes of 16 Knights, who had been staring at Noah all this time, flickered with anticipation. Let me see what you're planning to do, little brother. On the other side, as Pest looked at the composed Noah, uneasiness emerged in her heart. Could it be that this man truly has a way to defeat me? It wasn't that Pest was not confident. In this 4 million outer court, Pest was extremely confident. Apart from White Yiksha, there was no one else who could defeat her. However, Noah was able to solve the puzzle of Pest's game in an extremely straightforward manner. Furthermore, he unhesitatingly announced the answer to the puzzle while the discussion was still going on, when it was possible to change the rules. This proved that his confidence was not a bluff. This caused Pest to feel uneasy. Exactly what was this man planning to do? No matter what, eliminating the unfavorable conditions was of the utmost importance. As she thought of this, Pest suddenly spoke to Black Rabbit. "Referee, I request for a change in the rules. The game will still be restarted in a month's time. As for the victory condition, apart from the first victory condition, the second victory condition will be changed to defeat all of my subordinates." Sure enough. After the riddle was announced, the worst thing happened. Just as everyone's expressions turned ugly, Noah smiled faintly. Why go through so much trouble? This time, it was Pest's turn to be stunned. Under such circumstances, Noah turned around and looked at Pest. Since the game no longer requires a riddle, we might as well change them all. After saying those words, Noah waved his hand. A map spread open on the table. That was the map of the entire 4 million outer court stage area during the Fire Dragon Birth Festival. These 4 places are the 4 arenas used to host the Game of Grace during the Fire Dragon Birth Festival. Noah pointed to the 4 small dots at the 4 corners of the map and said to Shadora. "Shadora, is it possible to vacate these 4 arenas and let the people from Grim Gimmelhammer use them?" Shadora was completely stunned. Not to mention Shadora, even the others had a confused expression on their faces. Pest furrowed her brows and coldly looked at Noah. "What are you trying to say?" "What I'm trying to say is, since you want to make the victory condition so that we must defeat all of you, why don't you just change the game's content completely?" Noah narrowed his eyes and smiled faintly. "The game will be changed to a one-on-one battle. The 4 people from your community will each occupy one of the arenas. 3 days later, the game will begin. Similarly, we can only send out 4 people to participate in the battle. Each of us will randomly choose an arena and conduct 4 versus 4 individual battles. If all of us participants win all 4 individual battles, the game will be cleared." Noah looked straight at Pest. "If you lose one of the 4 individual battles, it will be considered your victory." Wah! Everyone immediately sucked in a mouthful of cold air. "You?" Pest was also astonished. "Are you serious?" "Of course I'm serious." For the first time, Noah revealed a serious expression. "However, I request that you retrieve all of the Black Death virus you injected into the arena." Hearing this, everyone present finally understood Noah's intention. Pest's eyes flickered slightly. However, an extremely displeased expression appeared on her face. However, immediately after, Pest relaxed her expression. "I understand." Pest stood up and revealed a smile filled with anger and malice toward Noah. "I swear, I will definitely make you my toy." After saying those words, a black wind suddenly swept forth with Pest as the center. When the black wind dissipated, Pest and the others had also disappeared without a trace. Only a pitch-black contract remained. It floated down from midair. Chapter 1321. Bestowment Game Name, Demon King's Arena Battle. Participant List, 3999999 Outer Sect and 4000000 Outer Sect Realm Wall Stage Area are a community of all participants and organizers. Designated Game Leaders, Sun's Traveler, Stars White Yiksha. Since they are unable to participate in the battle, they are forbidden to interact with them during the interruption of the game. The organizer's victory condition: successfully defend one of the 4 arenas. Contestants' victory condition: successfully win all 4 arenas. Interruption of the game: 3 days. Before the game restarts, both sides are not allowed to attack each other. The organizer's first prohibition: multiple ring defenders appearing in the same ring. Organizer Prohibition 2: injecting the Black Death virus into the participants' bodies. Participant Prohibition 1: leaving the game area, the stage area, during the interruption of the game. Participant Prohibition 2: leaving the area of free movement during the interruption of the game. The area is limited to 500 square meters around the headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth sacrificial ceremony. Participant Prohibition 3: when the game restarts, more than 4 participants will appear. Participant Prohibition 4: multiple participants attempting to conquer the same arena. Both sides Prohibition 1: before and after the game restarts, both sides are to investigate the arena defenders and attackers. Both sides Prohibition 2: after the game restarts, both sides are to change the arena defenders and attackers. Oath: respecting the above content, based on the honor, flag, and organizer's authority, this bestowment game will be held. Grim Grimoire Hamon seal. As soon as Grim Grimoire Hamon's party disappeared from the conference room, the contents of the pitch-black contract that fell from the sky were imprinted in everyone's eyes. Seeing that even the name of the bestowment game had been completely changed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, they also felt a heavy feeling in their hearts. They breathed a sigh of relief because they no longer had to worry about someone dying from the Black Death virus. They felt heavy because of the unfavorable situation of this new game. With the Demon King as the opponent, only 4 people can be dispatched. Mandela clenched his fists and said helplessly, "I really don't know what kind of joke this is." Although Pest was only a 5-digit Demon King and Salamandra was also a 5-digit Demon King, the significance of the two was completely different. On the other hand, it was based on one's own ability. On the other hand, it was the level obtained from the abilities of everyone in the community. The former was able to reach this level purely because of their strength. The latter, on the other hand, was a test of the independence of the community, the ability of the organizer, the individual strength of each member, and many other factors. In other words, it was simply impossible to select someone from Salamandra that could match Pest even if both of them were in the 5 digits. Even if the entire Salamandra were to fight against Pest alone, it was still possible for them to be completely wiped out. Even if they won, they would have to rely on human lives to achieve victory. Under such circumstances, they could only send out 4 people. It was almost like a joke. Furthermore, apart from the Demon Queen Pest, there were also Vazel, Lading and Strom, the 3 demons, by Pest's side. In a situation where they could only fight one-on-one, even if 3 of them were able to defeat Pest's subordinates, would the remaining person be able to defeat a 5-digit Demon King by himself? Perhaps Noah and 16 knights would be able to. However, that was only if they chose the arena that Pest was defending. As for which arena Pest's group of 4 would choose to defend, that was something that no one knew at all. After the game began, the 4 participants could only randomly choose an arena to attack. Furthermore, they were not allowed to change the arena they were attacking. In other words, if they were to choose the wrong arena and allow someone other than Noah and 16 knights to fight against Pest, they would definitely be finished. If they were to be defeated by Pest, they would not be able to obtain victory in all 4 arenas. The situation was indeed very unfavorable for them. However, no matter how unfavorable it was still better than everyone dying from the Black Death 1 month later. Furthermore, it was not like there was no hope for victory. Furthermore, there was another benefit to this. That is, apart from the 4 competitors, Pest's group would not be able to harm anyone other than the 4 competitors during the duration of the game. As the result of their negotiation, this could undoubtedly be considered a great achievement. The problem is, which 4 participants should we choose? The corners of 16 Knights' mouth rose as he looked at the surrounding people. Judging from the current situation, little brother, and I must participate in order to guarantee that we will have the greatest chance of victory against that spotted lowly. As for the remaining two, who should we choose?" Hearing those words, Jiu Yuao and Hiroi Kibuya raised their brows and took a step forward. As problematic children with the same nature as 16 knights, it was only natural that the extremely prideful Jiu Yuao and the extremely competitive Hiroi Kibuya would not give up on the opportunity to participate. However, before Jiu Yuao and Hiroi Kibuya could recommend themselves, Mandela spoke with an unquestionable tone. "Shadora must participate." Shadora was stunned. On the other hand, Mandela continued to speak energetically. "As the guardian of order, the ruler of the Northern District, if Shadora chooses to protect herself in the Demon King's game, she will be ridiculed by everyone and might even be impeached. We, Salamandra, will not allow such a thing to happen." However, as soon as he finished speaking, Noah raised his head and looked at Mandela. "That's true. If Shadora doesn't participate, you won't be able to achieve your goal." Mandela's expression froze on his face. Objective. The rest of the people were at a loss. Goal? What goal? Goal. The smile on 16 Knights' face slowly disappeared. He put his hands into his pockets and casually spoke. "Are you referring to the fact that Salamander herself is the one who lured the Demon King here?" Everyone's expressions froze when they heard those words. This was especially true for Shadora. The dignified look that she had been trying to put on had completely disappeared, and it was replaced by a look of shock. What's there to be shocked about? You can figure it out if you think about it carefully, right? 16 Knights said uninterestedly. Those guys used more than 100 pieces of stained glass as the key to the second victory condition of the original game. With so many pieces of stained glass, they definitely have to display the name of the community. Otherwise, how can they appear in the art and crafts exhibition? And if the spotted lowly displayed the name of a community that was once led by the Demon King, how could the stained glass still appear here? 16 Knights looked at Mandela with a half-smile. Unless the organizer purposely let it go. Isn't that right? Mandela's eyes began to shake violently. Everyone understood what was going on. The main culprit who lured the Demon King to the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was Salamandra. Brother Mandela. Shadora looked at Mandela in disbelief. Is this true? Shadora obviously didn't know about this at all. Why? Why are you doing this? Black Rabbit shouted almost instinctively. As a member of the community led by the ruler of the hierarchy, you are also the protector of order. How dare you collude with the Demon King who is disrupting order? Mandela was strangely angered by Black Rabbit's words. I won't collude with the Demon King. That's right, you didn't collude with the Demon King, Noah said calmly. You just want Shadora to defeat the Demon King and tell the other rulers and citizens in the Northern District who look down on Shadora because of her young age that even though Shadora is young, she is still one of the rulers who can protect the Northern District and build up her reputation, right? Noah looked at Mandela with an extremely cold gaze. It's just that your actions make me very unhappy. Chapter 1322. In the box court, the Demon King was called a natural disaster. Because once the Demon King used his authority as the organizer to forcefully pull people into his game of gifts, it was simply a disguised form of robbery and plunder. For example, No Name, once they were defeated in the game of gifts with the Demon King, the price was simply frightening. The flag and name that symbolized the community were taken away. The companions that they spent all their time with were taken away. The wealth that had been accumulated over the years was taken away. Even the vitality of the land and the community was taken away. This kind of consequence was only one step away from completely destroying the community. And the predecessor of No Name was a community that dominated the entire Eastern District, but it was destroyed to this extent by the Demon King. Such a terrible consequence perfectly displayed the word natural disaster. Now, Mandela took the initiative to bring such a natural disaster over. Even if the Demon King this time is not as terrible as the one who destroyed No Name, it is only a 5-digit number, but for the residents of the lower class, it is still a natural disaster. Noah looked at Mandela with an extremely cold gaze. In order to get the leader of the community out of the embarrassing situation of being looked down upon and distrusted, your salamandra is willing to sacrifice the people of the lower class. As expected of a community that can abandon its allies in distress without hesitation. I won't let that happen. Mandela clenched his fists and growled. Even if I have to sacrifice my life. We, Salamandra, will also protect the residents of the lower class in the hands of the Demon King. As soon as his voice fell, a figure suddenly rushed in front of Mandela. While Mandela was caught off guard, he suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed Mandela's collar, and pulled Mandela's entire body up. What makes you say that? Tightly grabbing Mandela's collar, Noah said with a furious face. Protect the residents of the lower class even if you have to sacrifice your life. I'm afraid that all the residents of this 4 million outer sect will die in the hands of the Demon King along with your salamander. Mandela's expression changed. This time, it's fortunate that 16th Night and I were able to take the initiative and stop Pest. If the two of us didn't stop Pest, as long as she released the Black Death virus into the town, would your salamandra be able to suffer for the sake of those citizens? Noah's hand grew stronger and stronger. Or do you think that as long as you are willing to sacrifice your life, you can let the innocent residents suffer with no qualms? Mandela was speechless. He could only grit his teeth and turn his head away. He could not even meet Noah's gaze. However, after a while, Mandela turned his head back and met Noah's gaze with a determined expression. I was the one who made this decision. Shadora doesn't know about this at all. As long as you can let Shadora appear in the game in 3 days, I'm willing to accept any punishment. Brother Mandela. Shadora bit her lip, looking sad. This was because Shadora knew that Mandela was doing this for her sake. Because of her young age, Shadora was looked down upon by the other rulers of the social class. She was even viewed as an enemy by them. She did not have any dignity at all. Similarly, because of her young age, the residents of the Northern District would never believe that an 11-year-old girl could protect their personal safety as the guardian of order and maintain order in the entire Northern District. In order to let this Shadora stand out and be recognized by others as the ruler of the social class, Mandela did not hesitate to lure the Demon King over. As long as she could defeat the Demon King in the Demon King's gift game, all the suspicions against Shadora would be reduced by more than half, if not all, of them. Therefore, all of this was for Shadora. As an 11-year-old child, Shadora almost wanted to cry. For her, her brother had become a sinner. However, Shadora held back her tears. She bit her lip and said in a trembling voice, Please let me participate in the game in 3 days, yes. Shadora wanted to atone for her sins with Mandela, which meant that she would be punished. However, if she did that, Mandela would not be able to fulfill what he had done regardless of the consequences. In order to live up to her brother's expectations, Shadora chose not to bear the consequences but to bear the results. The results of Mandela's teachings. The determination of the siblings made the anger in the hearts of Black Rabbit, Joyu and Osaka, and Yaito gradually dissipate. Even Noah's anger was slowly fading away. The anger on his face was gradually replaced by displeasure. Recalling all the disputes he encountered in the world of the Dark Bullet, Noah looked at Mandela coldly. Listen carefully. The thing I hate the most is to let things like political power involve innocent people. After that, Noah pushed Mandela away forcefully, causing Mandela to stumble back involuntarily. Don't do it again. With that, Noah turned around, pushed open the door of the meeting room, and left. The room was dead silent. The one who broke the silence was 16 Nights Reverse. Out of the 4 contestants, Salamandra will take 1, and No Name will take the remaining 3. 16 Knights Reverse scratched his head and said with a bored expression. Is there a problem? Yes. Mandela tidied up his messy clothes and closed his eyes. No problem. Although a community without a flag and no name took up 3/4 of the contestants in the Demon King game, it was not a peaceful game worth participating in. You could lose your life at any time. Under such circumstances, they naturally had to choose the 4 most capable contestants. Furthermore, Salamandra was famous for not having a single elite. In terms of individual combat power, other than Shadora, who obtained the dragon horn of the first leader of Salamandra, no one in Salamandra could fight with the main members of No Name. The first leader of Salamandra was one of the strongest species, the Star Sea Dragon King. The dragon horn left behind by the Star Sea Dragon King carried a huge amount of spiritual power. Although Shadora, who inherited the dragon horn, was not mature yet, with the dragon horn of the Star Sea Dragon King, her combat power was above Juyuki Asaka and Kazuhito Masaaki. She could even barely catch up to Black Rabbit, who was a noble of Hakata and had 4 gifted weapons that simulated divinity. Therefore, it was enough to give 1 spot to Shadora. As long as Shadora could participate in the Demon King game, then after defeating the Demon King, Shadora would be able to gain reputation and trust, and take a big step forward on the path to becoming a leader. If she failed, then Salamandra would be taken away by the Demon King, who controlled the Black Death. If she won, she would get what she wanted. If she lost, she would be doomed. It was with this kind of determination that Mandela attracted the Demon King. Although this was extremely unfair to the innocent people and Shadora, who was only 11 years old and could not bear such a huge burden. However, this was something that would happen sooner or later. As long as she is a leader, then she will have to fight the Demon King sooner or later. Mandela said with an emotionless voice. If she can't even pass this level of test, then Shadora will die in the hands of the Demon King sooner or later. Then it is better to go all out now. If she can win, then it can be considered as accumulating experience. Shadora lowered her head and fell silent, but her eyes were filled with determination. From this moment onwards, this child had truly grown up, and also had some self-awareness as a leader of the social class. Of course, that was Salamandra's problem. As an outsider, as well as an ally that was once abandoned, the people from No Name had no right to interrupt. Just like that, there were only 3 days left before the battle with the Demon King. Chapter 13:23. The next day. In order to announce that the rules of the Demon King's gift game had been greatly changed, Salamandra, as the organizer of the Fire Dragon's Birth Festival and one of the rulers of the North District, gathered all the communities that had been dragged into the game. Because they didn't have a flag or a name, the members of No Name didn't appear. With Noah as the leader, Black Rabbit, Joyuen Flying Bird, Kasuga Hikari, 16 Knights Reversal, and Ren as companions, the members of No Name were hiding in the corridor outside the hall. They leaned against the wall and listened to the movements in the hall. When Shadora explained the rules and contents of the Demon King's gift game and announced that No Name would take 3 out of the 4 contestants, the entire hall was filled with cheers that shook the air. Let No Name send out 3 contestants? This is a joke, right? How can No Name be trusted? Isn't this too much? Similar noises and sounds of disbelief reverberated throughout the entire hall. That was natural. Although the content of the game had been completely changed, the content of the previous game had not been changed. The people here still remembered it clearly. Undoubtedly, it was written that as the organizer, the Demon King's party's victory condition was to subdue or kill all the community members here. In other words, that was the price to pay for losing in the Demon King's gift game. If they were defeated in this game of grace, then all the communities here would either become subordinates of the Demon King or lose their lives. Under such circumstances, among the participants of the game that decided their fates, 3 out of 4 of them were communities that didn't have a flag or a name and were at the lowest of the lowest in the hole. That wasn't the level of uneasiness, but the level of despair and fear. All of a sudden, voices of opposition spread out, causing the ground of the fire dragon's birth ceremony to tremble slightly. Seeing this situation, Salamandra only glanced at Mandela. Mandela took a step forward and announced with an unimaginable pressure. If any of you think you can win against a 5-digit demon king in a one-on-one battle, then stand out. With that one sentence, the huge waves of sound in the hall disappeared without a trace. The members of the community were left speechless. They even lowered their heads, unable to say a word. After observing up to this point, Noah understood. These people wouldn't have any more objections. Then, there's only one question left. 16 Knights smiled at Noah. Of the remaining contestant, who should we choose? In order to guarantee victory against Pest, Noah and 16 Knights, who possessed the greatest battle prowess, would definitely be sent out. Thus, 2 out of the 4 contestants were decided. Then, Salamandra, who had to stand out as the ruler of the hierarchy, would take one of the contestants. As for the remaining contestant, how should he choose one of the members of no name? Although Black Rabbit wants to participate, as the holder of judgment authority, he is unable to freely participate in the bestowment game. Black Rabbit's long rabbit ears drooped down as he spoke in a dispirited manner. Thus, I can only rely on you all. If Black Rabbit could participate, then the remaining contestant would undoubtedly be Black Rabbit's. Black Rabbit possessed 4 bestowment tools that simulated godheads. As Sakra's subordinate, Black Rabbit's strength was also in existence that no one in the lower hierarchy could match. Conservatively speaking, Black Rabbit would be a 5-digit demon king. Unfortunately, as the holder of judgment authority, Black Rabbit was unable to freely participate in the bestowment game. Is there no way for Lady Letitia to participate? Ren looked at Noah. Although she has already lost her godhead and has less than 1/10 of her strength remaining, as an original demon king, Lady Letitia's strength is much stronger than ordinary people. If Lady Letitia were to participate in the bestowment game, our chances of victory would increase by a lot, right? Letitia is my personal bestowment game. Even if she were to participate, she would be counted as one contestant with me. She would also be able to challenge the same arena. Noah shook his head. Thus, it won't work. Then, that silver-haired lowly maid called Astrid also won't be able to participate, right? In verse 16 Knights folded his arms and looked to the side. As expected, the remaining contestant should be chosen from Milady and Haruhito, right? You're quite smart. Juyoshi nodded in satisfaction, then looked at Haruhi Biao. Haruhito-san, what do you think? However, facing Juyo's question, Haruhito seemed to be a little absent-minded. Everyone looked at Haruhibu Yaichi strangely. Haruhito-san. Juyo said with some doubt. What's wrong with you? Haruhito didn't react to Juyo's words, but still stood there absent-mindedly. Noah, who felt that something was wrong, frowned. Then, Noah realized. Haruhito's situation seemed to be a little strange. Although he seemed to be absent-minded, his cheeks revealed an abnormal blush. His cheeks were covered with sweat. His body seemed to be a little shaky. There was no focus in his eyes at all. Just like that, Haruhito's body swayed and suddenly fell forward. At this moment, there was only one person who managed to react. Noah flashed in front of Haruhito and directly took him into his arms. Noah felt it the moment he caught it. Haruhito's body was frighteningly hot. Haruhito, Miss Haruhito. Juyo, Kurorobi, and Ren were shocked. 16 Knights, on the other hand, frowned and became serious. Hey, it can't be. Ignoring 16 Knights' whispers, Noah hugged Hiroi Hikari, whose body was boiling hot, and took out the black contract document as if he had thought of something. Bestowed game name, Demon King's Arena Battle. Participant list, 39999999 Outer Gate and 40000000 Outer Gate Stage. All participants and organizers in the arena area. Designated Game Leader, Sun's Traveler, Stars White Yiksha. Because you can't participate in the battle now, contact is prohibited during the interruption of the game. Organizer's Victory Condition, successfully defend one of the 4 arenas. Participants' Victory Condition, successfully defend all 4 arenas. Interruption of the game, 3 days. Before the game restarts, both sides are not allowed to attack each other. Organizer's First Prohibition, multiple arena defenders appearing in the same arena. Organizer's Second Prohibition, injecting the Black Death virus into the participant's body. Participant's First Prohibition, leaving the game area, stage area, during the interruption of the game. Participant's Second Prohibition, leaving the area of free movement during the interruption of the game within 500 square meters of the Fire Dragon's Birth Sacrificial Ceremony headquarters. Participant's Third Prohibition, when the game restarts, there are more than 4 participants. Participant's Fourth Prohibition, multiple participants attacking the same arena. Both sides joint prohibition, before and after the game restarts, there is no investigation of the attackers and defenders. Both sides joint prohibition, after the game restarts, there is no change in the attackers and defenders. Oath, respecting the above, based on the honor, flag, and authority of the organizer, this game will be held. Grim Grimoire Hameln Seal. After confirming the contents of the contract, Noah's face darkened. I was tricked by the Demon King. Noah directly carried Hiroi Hibaku in a princess carry. I'll send Hiroi Hibaku back to his room. After saying this, Noah carried Hiroi Hibaku back to his room. Everyone reacted and immediately followed. Hiroi Hibaku, who was carried by Noah, was sweating profusely. His face was flushed, and he weakly opened his eyes to look at Noah's serious face. Hiroi Hibaku looked at Noah in a daze. After a while, he murmured as if he was in a dream. Dad. Chapter 13:24. With a soft groan, Hiroi Buyao's consciousness gradually began to awaken. No. To say that he was sober wasn't entirely true. With Hirohibu Yachi's current state, rather than saying that he was awake, it would be more accurate to say that he barely kept his consciousness. His body temperature was terrifyingly high. His head also became sluggish because of the fever. His vision seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. He couldn't see clearly at all. He felt that his body was extremely heavy, and his consciousness wasn't very clear. His body was sticky and uncomfortable. Obviously, he was sweating a lot. In this extremely uncomfortable situation, Hirohibu Yaichi felt that even getting up became quite difficult. He could only raise one hand and put it on his burning forehead. With some difficulty in breathing, he murmured in a dreamy voice. What happened? This kind of casual and natural question was answered by another person besides Hirohibu Yaichi. You had a fever and suddenly collapsed. Hearing this voice, Hirohibu Yaichi was startled at first, then he turned his head and looked to the side. Only then did Hirohibu Yaichi realize his current situation. At this time, Hirohibu Yaichi was lying on a bed. And beside the bed, Noah was sitting there, like a considerate nurse, using a small knife and smoothly peeling an apple. Seeing this, Hirohibu Yaichi tilted his head and said in confusion. Noah. Fortunately, you didn't ask me who I am when you woke up. Otherwise, even I would have panicked. Noah smiled slightly and continued to peel the apple in his hand, letting the apple peel lengthen with gravity. How do you feel? Very bad. Hirohibu Yaichi answered honestly. Undoubtedly, His somewhat childish face was full of sweat, and there was an abnormal red flush, but there was a kind of weak feeling that was rarely seen. But, I'm used to lying on the bed, so, it's not a big deal. Used to lying on the bed? Noah's hand movement slightly paused, then he recovered as if nothing had happened and said casually. In other words, you often get sick. Haruhibu Yaichi was silent for a while, then slowly said. Not often, but for a long time, my body was sick. In my era, there was no cure for the disease. In the past, I was always sick and could only lie on the hospital bed, and I couldn't even walk. While saying this, Haruhibu Yaichi involuntarily reached out his hand and held the round wooden carving hanging on his neck. His sweaty and flushed face became softer. Later, someone gave me this life catalog, which allowed me to gain the power of friends. I recovered and gradually began to live a normal life. Is that so? Noah looked at Haruhibu Yaichi. The person who gave you this life catalog was your father. Haruhi Hiroyuki looked at Noah in surprise. How did you know? I guessed, Noah said with a teasing smile. After all, when you weren't fully conscious, you called me Dad. Called you father. Haruhibu Yaichi froze on the spot, and when he saw the teasing look on Noah's face, his face became redder. It was because of embarrassment. No matter who it was, anyone would feel embarrassed to call their friend Dad while they were unconscious. In order to get rid of this embarrassment, Haruhibu Yaichi awkwardly changed the topic. Why did I suddenly have a fever? Hearing this, the smile on Noah's face began to disappear, and he gently sighed. Because the Black Death lurking in your body broke out. Black Death. Haruhibu Yaichi was stunned, and the next second, he was stunned. You said, I have the Black Death. Noah nodded, which made Haruhibu Yaichi confused. Why? Haruhibu Yaichi didn't ask why he had the Black Death. For him to suddenly have the Black Death at this time, there could only be one reason. It was the doing of the Demon King who could control the Black Death, Pest. After all, before this, Pest had openly admitted that she had injected the Black Death into the bodies of all the participants. If Haruhibu Yaichi had the Black Death, it could only be Pest's doing. However, when the rules of the game were rewritten, Noah had clearly requested for the other party to retrieve the Black Death virus. The contract also clearly stated that the organizer was prohibited from injecting the Black Death virus into the participants, wasn't it? Since that was the case, why would the Black Death appear? As if he had seen through the doubts in Haruhibu Yaichi's heart, Noah smacked his lips. That spotted loli is playing a word game with us. Noah took out the contract and handed it to Haruhibu Yaichi. Take a careful look at this contract. Haruhibu Yaichi obediently received the contract and began to carefully read it. Bestowed game name, Demon King's Arena Battle. Participant list, 3999999 Outer Sect and 4000000 Outer Sect Boundary Wall Stage Area. Community of all participants and organizers. Designated game leader by the participants, Sun's Traveler, Stars White Yiksha. As they are currently unable to participate in the battle, contact with them is prohibited during the interruption of the game. Victory condition for the host, successfully defend one of the 4 arenas. Victory condition for the participants, successfully seize all 4 arenas. Interruption of the game, 3 days. Before the game restarts, both parties are not allowed to attack each other. First prohibition for the host, multiple arena defenders appearing in the same arena. Second prohibition for the host, injecting the Black Death virus into the participants' bodies. First prohibition for the host, leaving the game area, stage area, during the interruption of the game. Second prohibition for the host, leaving the range of free movement during the interruption of the game. The range is limited to 500 square meters around the headquarters of the Fire Dragon Birth Sacrificial Ceremony. Third prohibition for the host: when the game restarts, more than 4 participants will appear. Fourth prohibition for the host: multiple participants appearing in the same arena. First prohibition for both parties: before and after the game restarts, investigating the attackers and defenders of the arena. First prohibition for both parties: after the game restarts, changing the attackers and defenders of the arena. Oath: respecting the above, based on the honor, flag, and authority of the host, the bestowed game will be held. Grim Grimoire Hamon, seal. Looking at the contract several times, Haruai Sabaki couldn't find any problems with it, so he looked at Noah with suspicion. The contract clearly states that the host is prohibited from injecting the Black Death virus into the participants' bodies. The contract does state that the host is prohibited from injecting the Black Death virus into the participants' bodies. Noah reminded him. But, it doesn't state that the host is allowed to recover the Black Death virus that was previously injected into the participants' bodies, right? After being reminded by Noah, Haruai Hibikushi was immediately enlightened. That's right. The contract did not state that the host was allowed to recover the Black Death virus that was previously injected into the participants' bodies. In other words, the Black Death virus that Pest injected into the participants' bodies was not recovered. She merely stopped spreading the Black Death virus. After understanding that, Haruai Hibikushi puffed up his cheeks. Have we been deceived? Not exactly deceived. After all, we didn't specifically state when the host is allowed to recover the Black Death virus. Noah narrowed his eyes. That's why the host is taking advantage of this loophole and deliberately delaying the recovery time. If one of our main players were to fall down due to the Black Death virus during the game's interruption and be unable to participate in the competition, the host would have profited, no? In the end, I became the one to fall down. Haruai Hibikushi became somewhat depressed. In other words, I won't be able to participate in the competition, right? There's nothing you can do about it. Noah extended his hand and gently patted Haruai Hibikushi's head. This time, you should properly rest and leave the competition to us. Seeing Noah gently patting his head, Haruai Hibikushi's beautiful face blushed. However, he obediently nodded his head and chose to obey. Chapter 1325. After that, Noah chatted with Haruai Hitaki for a while and fed him a peeled apple. When Haruai Hitaki was tired, Noah took care of the girl and laid her down before walking out of the room. Just as he walked out of the room, Jiuyuki, who had a pointy hat on her shoulder, walked over from the other end of the corridor. Seeing Noah come out of Haruai's room, Jiuyuki quickened her pace and came in front of Noah. How is Haruai's condition? Can you say that she's fine? Noah bitterly smiled. That girl is infected with the Black Death. If it's dragged on for too long, she will die. As one of the most terrifying plagues in human history, the Black Death was still feared even now. It was a synonym for the Grim Reaper. After all, the Black Death was contagious. Because of the outbreak of the Black Death, Mandela even directly ordered that the surroundings of Haruai's room be completely isolated, forbidding anyone from Salamandra to freely enter or leave. Only the members of No Name were allowed to pass. Under such circumstances, the only ones who could take care of Haruai were the members of No Name. I already asked Letitia to stay behind and take care of Haruai. Noah could only say so. So, for the time being, we can be at ease. Is it only temporary? Jiuyuki worriedly asked. Could it be that even you don't have a way to cure Haruai's illness? No way. Noah directly surrendered. If it's an injury, no matter how serious it is, I have a way to heal Haruai in a short period of time. Even if she loses an arm or a leg, I have a way to heal her. But when it comes to illness, I really can't do anything. Noah's collection in the Gate of Babylon mainly came from 2 worlds. One was the world of the Shape Moon. The other was the world of the game. The collection in the M-shaped moon world was mainly prepared by Gaia and Alea. There were all kinds of legendary items that could exist in the form of weapons and tools. There were even gold, silver, and treasures. There was also an unlimited supply of consumables. Unfortunately, there were no medical props in this room. No matter what, curing a disease required a specific dose of medicine. No matter how far science had come, there had never been a medicine that could cure all diseases. Otherwise, there would be no point for the rest of the medicines to exist. Under such circumstances, Gaia and Alea had no way of preparing medicine for Noah to treat his illness. After all, with Tungtung's self-control, he couldn't possibly go out of his way to get some cold medicine and stuff it into Noah's treasure trove just because of a small cold, right? Needless to say, the items in the game were even more valuable. At the very least, Noah had heard of a weakened status in the game, and of poisoned status in the game, but he had never heard of a sick status in the game. Naturally, none of the items in the game could be used to recover his condition. If Noah had a way to cure Haruhibu Yai Chi, there were only two ways. The first was to use the shaman incarnation to give Haruhibu Yai Chi the power of protection, increasing his resistance to the disease and eliminating the Black Death. The second was to simply let Haruhibu Yai Chi die of the disease, and then use a resurrection item to revive him. Of these two methods, the first one could only be used after Haruhibu Yai Chi died, so there was no point in using it now. The second one was to use the shaman incarnation to give Haruhibu Yai Chi the power of protection, which could only be done through mouth to mouth. If he mentioned this to Zhou Yuanfei, he would probably be beaten to death by this conservative woman from the Showa era. Zhou Yuanfei, who didn't know what Noah was thinking, could only sigh and reveal a firm expression. So you're saying that if I want to save Haruhibu Yai Chi, I have to defeat the demon king controlling the Black Death? Well, that's how it is. Noah said half-heartedly. However, that's my mission. Milady, you just have to think about how to deal with the others. Your mission. Zhou Yuanfei was confused. How is it your mission? You might not necessarily encounter that demon king called Pest, right? It must be known that in this game, regardless of whether it was the host or the participants, it was forbidden to investigate who was attacking the arena or defending the arena before and after the start of the game. In other words, Noah was not allowed to send people to investigate who would be defending which arena on Pest's side. Pest was also not allowed to send people to investigate who would be attacking which arena on Noah's side. Everything was done randomly. If Noah wanted to fight against Pest, he would have to choose the fighting ring that Pest was in charge of guarding. The probability of this was only 1 in 4. It was very hard to say what the result would be. Noah would end up fighting against Pest. If that was the case, it wouldn't be Noah's mission, right? You don't have to worry about that. Noah shrugged. Then, he looked at Zhou Yuanfei. You, on the other hand, will you be fine? Amen. Zhou Yuanfei raised her brows and said arrogantly. You think I'll have a problem? Had it been before, not to mention Pest, Zhou Yuanfei would not even be able to deal with demons like Vasil, Lading and Strom. A demon who had the merit of causing the death of 130 children was much more powerful than a first-rate existence like Jard. In the past, Zhou Yuanfei did not have enough understanding of her own grace and could only place her simulated godhead in another person's body so that those with a lower level of spirit would submit to her. Zhou Yuanfei would not be able to defeat those demons. But now, Zhou Yuanfei clearly understood what her own grace was. As long as she provided Zhou Yuanfei with sufficient grace, with Zhou Yuanfei's exceptional ability, she would become extremely terrifying. Ignoring everything else, Black Rabbit had once said that if Zhou Yuanfei was provided with 3 or 4 relatively powerful grace, then with Zhou Yuanfei's ability, it might even be possible for her to increase her grace to 4 digits. Unfortunately, powerful grace was not something that could be obtained just because one wanted to. Not everyone could be like Noah, who had the backing of 2 restraints and a treasure trove of mythical-level treasures. It was precisely because of this that Noah was not as confident as Zhou Yuanfei. Indeed, your grace ability is against the rules. As long as you have sufficient grace to exhaust, even Black Rabbit would have to worry if she would fall into your trap, right? Noah reminded. However, that's only if you have the grace. If you use up all the grace in your hands before you achieve victory, then you will definitely lose. Zhou Yuanfei was immediately speechless. Indeed, this was a weakness that Zhou Yuanfei had to pay attention to. Ancient flying birds' blessings were all very ordinary blessings. After being bestowed with the simulated godhead and increasing the power of the spirit, the lifespan of the grace would be greatly reduced, and they would become consumables. At that time, once Zhou Yuanfei used up all her grace, even people like Jard might not be able to defeat her. Furthermore, Zhou Yuanfei's physical ability was only at the level of an ordinary person. As soon as an enemy got close to her, she would lose her ability to fight in one hit. Unless you're bestowed with the simulated godhead and increasing the power of the spirit, you'll be able to withstand the powerful grace and protect yourself. Noah looked at Zhou Yuanfei seriously. I can help you with this, but it depends on whether you're willing to do it. Zhou Yuanfei fell silent. After a while, Zhou Yuanfei lifted her head and seemed to have made a decision. I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to rely on others to pave the way for me. Otherwise, it would be meaningless for me to leave everything in the original world and come to this world. Zhou Yuanfei extended her hand and touched the elf with the pointy hat on her shoulder. Don't worry, I'll be able to get the powerful grace. However, I'll have to ask this child to help me. Her. Noah looked at the elf with the pointy hat in a daze. The elf with the pointy hat who was standing on Zhou Yuanfei's shoulder seemed to be dancing happily. Blessing of power, seeing this, Noah who did not understand could only choose to trust Zhou Yuanfei. Just like that, the time for the battle with the Demon King was getting closer and closer. Chapter 1326. Most of the artworks displayed at the fire dragon's birth ceremony were placed in a large empty space. It was a tunnel, and there were squares dug out on both sides of the wall. They looked like exhibition cabinets, and many artworks were placed in the large empty space. In this large empty space, there were many beautiful lanterns, candlesticks, and stained glass. There were also some specially made gifts that were used in daily life and even in battle. They had great artistic value. It was said that there were also some ancient gifts that were held by famous Shura gods since the beginning of Hakuda's construction. No matter how one looked at it, they were the rarest of the rare existences. However, such a rare gift naturally couldn't be displayed in a large empty space at any time and place. Therefore, after the Demon King's attack, those gifts were protected by Salamandra and moved out of this large empty space. Because of this, Lading, who had been enjoying the beautiful lanterns, candlesticks, and stained glass in the large empty space in the center of the exhibition hall, spoke with some regret. It's so beautiful. Even these ordinary things can be made so beautiful. I really want to see the artworks that existed since the beginning of Hakuda's construction. It's such a pity that Salamandra moved them away. Don't tell me you want to occupy these worthless things too. Witzi said helplessly as he carried the flute that was as thick as a stick. Don't forget, we're not planning to rob these useless things. We're planning to rob talents that can strengthen the community. You're right, Lading said unhappily. But, it's a woman's nature to be moved by beautiful things. Witzi, don't you understand that? Unfortunately, I'm not interested in women's interests. Witzi scratched his head. If I have the time, I'd rather take revenge on that kid who punched me. What? Do men only know how to fight and kill? You're so annoying. Lading was like a little girl who loved to look beautiful. She put on an innocent and naive attitude. Can't you be a little more ambitious? I mean, we're demons. Witsy sighed. As demons, aren't we supposed to pursue killing? That's why I don't like that old demon style. Ladding threw her gaze to the side as if she was throwing a tantrum. That's what Master thinks too, right? Pest, who was wearing a dress with black and white spots on it, sat on a rock. She did not even look in Ladding's direction as she spoke with a monotonous voice and an expressionless face. I'm not interested. Sigh, Ladding lowered her head as if she had received a blow. I thought that since we're both women, Master would have the same opinion as me. Before that, I still have things that I must do, Pest spoke in a somewhat cold and indifferent manner. I don't have time to pay attention to these boring things. Hearing Pest's words, Will and Ladding immediately looked to one another. Not only were the puzzles of the game solved, the content of the game was also greatly changed. Even the enemies that they thought would be fine after sealing White Yiksha suddenly had a bunch of powerful helpers. 16 knights, who sent Will flying with a single punch right from the start. Jiuyuan Flying Bird, who had been hiding a trump card when he was attacked by rats. Haruai Hikari, who was able to use the favor of phantom beasts and talk to animals. Lastly, the unfathomable Noah, who solved the puzzles in an extremely short amount of time and exposed the true identities of everyone, completely changing the content of the game. Frankly speaking, Will and Ladding were no longer like they were in the beginning. They no longer thought that they could effortlessly win this game. Undoubtedly, the Demon King had used his authority as the organizer to force others to participate in this game of favor. For the Demon King's side, this was an absolute advantage. However, the outcome had turned out like this. Who wouldn't be worried at all? At the very least, Will and Ladding were unable to do so. Right at that moment, Pest suddenly spoke. I will defeat that man called Noah. Will and Ladding were startled at the same time. Master, Ladding cautiously said. The opponent is randomly selected in the game. Even if that man appears, the chances of him facing you is only 1 in 4, right? However, faced with this question, Pest merely replied with a calm expression. Although that is the case, I have a feeling that my opponent will definitely be that man. After saying those words, Pest turned her gaze to Will and Ladding. As for the two of you, if you don't have the confidence to win, I will be the one to give you confidence. After saying those words, a black gust of wind blew around Pest. She disappeared within the black gust of wind. The whistling black gust of wind suddenly undulated and appeared before Will. Pest, who appeared from the black gust of wind, was floating in midair. She extended a hand and placed it on Will's head. Incarnation of Will River, I will now bestow you with the divine spark and allow you to become a true demon god. Chapter 13:27. When the sky regained its brightness once again, the gentle sunlight that descended from the sky caused the huge reflection of the boundary wall to expand continuously on the ground. A dense and heavy atmosphere spread throughout the entire 4 million outer sect area. 3 days ago, this place was very lively because of the fire dragon's birth ceremony held by the eastern and northern districts. But now, 3 days later, it was as if this place had lost its vitality. There was not a single person to be seen. But that was only natural. After encountering the disaster of the box court, as an ordinary citizen, it was very difficult for them to continue living leisurely here. Under the arrangement of Salamandra, the ordinary citizens had already gone to seek refuge. The only ones left were those who belonged to the various communities that were bound by the rules of the gift game and were unable to leave the designated activity area. And those communities were all gathered in the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Only 5 people came out of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Noah. 16 Knights. Ancient Bird. Sandora. And as the referee, Black Rabbit, who had to personally witness the outcome of this gift game and preside over the overall situation until the end. Other than these 5 people, everyone else stayed in the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. It wasn't because the others didn't want to move with Noah and the others. But when Sandora announced the 4 contestants in front of everyone, other than Black Rabbit, who was the referee, everyone else was bound by the contract and couldn't leave the operation headquarters. Well, that's to be expected, right? Reverse 16 Knights tugged at his collar a little roughly as he curled his lips into a smile. If we don't restrict the actions of others, then when we fight with the organizers, others can easily interfere from the side. That doesn't comply with the 3rd restriction of the contestants. When the game restarts, only 4 contestants can appear. Yes. Black Rabbit nodded heavily, his expression was unprecedentedly serious. The game will restart soon. Black Rabbit's rabbit ears have already received the command from the Box Court Central Hub. Everyone, please start choosing the arena you want to attack. After saying that, Black Rabbit spread out a map. The map that was spread out was exactly the same as the one that Noah had taken out during the meeting 3 days ago. The only difference was that the locations of the 4 rings were marked with 4 crosses, and they were marked with the symbols of 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Now, the members of the Grim Gimmel family have taken up the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th ring respectively. Hey too raised his head and looked at the crowd. Everyone, please consider carefully which arena number to choose. Once you have chosen, you will not be able to change it. Noah, 16 Knights Reverse, Distant Bird, and Shadora exchanged glances. Then I'll choose arena number 1. Reverse 16 Knights forcefully hammered his fist into his palm. His eyes revealed an unprecedented excitement. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Lord Demon King, I hope you can give me enough fun. Then I'll choose the 2nd arena. Jiao Fei now did not want to be outdone and made a declaration. She held the wine-red gift card tightly in her hand. Let me show my brand new strength on this stage. Seeing how Reverse 16 Knights and Distant Bird had decisively decided which arena to take down without any hesitation, Shadora couldn't help but admire them. The reason why they were so decisive was because Reverse 16 Knights and Distant Bird believed that they would win. They didn't think that they would lose. To put it nicely, this straightforwardness was confidence. To put it bluntly, it was arrogance. Regardless of whether it was confidence or arrogance, Reverse 16 Knights and Distant Bird had displayed it in a way that no one would dislike. This made Shadora, who was somewhat nervous and worried, calm down a lot. Under such circumstances, Noah, who had been observing Shadora's performance, smiled and spoke very casually. In that case, I'll choose arena number 3. Understood. Shadora pulled herself together and said with the most serious expression. Then, please give me arena number 4. I swear in the name of the ruler that I won't submit to the Demon King. After Noah's group of 4 had decided on the arena they would attack, the pitch-black contract document in Black Rabbit's hand flashed with light. The following information was written on it. Gift game name, Demon King's Arena No. 1 Arena Raider, Reverse 16 Knights. Raider of Arena number 2, Jiao Fei Niao Arena 3 Raider, Noah Doria Arena 4 Raider, Shadora Turturek. According to the rules of the game, the Raider is not allowed to change the target midway. The defender is also not allowed to change the arena they are defending. Respecting the above content, based on the honor, flag, and authority of the organizer, the gift game will be restarted. After confirming the new content on the contract document, Black Rabbit raised the pitch-black contract document in its hand and declared loudly. Then, the gift game Demon King's Arena begins now. The heavy atmosphere that permeated the entire world suddenly exploded. Just as Noah and the others were about to head to the arena, Reverse 16 Knights, who accidentally passed by Noah, lowered his voice and left this sentence. I'll let you have the feast this time. If you lose, I won't let you go. Hearing this, Noah was slightly stunned. At this time, reverse 16 Knights had already turned into a black shadow and rushed out. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Looking at the direction where reverse 16 Knights disappeared, Noah couldn't help but laugh. I really can't hide from him, east of the outer door area, where arena number 1 was. Reverse 16 Knights, who was mixed with the sound of breaking air, fell from the sky like a cannonball. With a heavy muffled explosion, he landed heavily on the ground. Straightening his body and raising his head, 16 Knights turned his gaze in the direction of the arena. Then, he raised his eyebrows and grinned. Ha! So it's you, a third-rate demon. The person who appeared in the arena was Wei Shi. However, in the face of reverse 16 Knights' provocation, Wei Shi only had a ruthless smile and did not reply. On his body, an almost terrifying aura gradually rose. Sensing the aura, 16 Knights' disdainful expression gradually disappeared as he stared intently at Wei Shi. You seem to have changed, ha. Wei Shi closed his eyes and chuckled. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. Whether I'm different or not, you'll have to experience it for yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Shi lowered his body and raised the thick stick-like flute in his hand. His entire body was like a wild cheetah as he charged out amidst the hurricane that shook the air. Compared to before, his speed was simply incomparable. West of the outer door area, where arena number 2 was, Jiu Yufei, who was slowly and gracefully walking into the arena area, suddenly stopped and looked in front of her. Oh! La Ting twirled the flute in her hand and laughed out loud. I didn't expect to meet you here. I apologize for not greeting you last time at the exhibition venue. Exhibition venue? Jiu Yufei narrowed her eyes and smiled sweetly. So you're the one who manipulated the rats to attack me. That's just a greeting. La Ting smiled leisurely. How is it? Are you satisfied? Satisfied, of course I'm satisfied. Jiu Yufei smiled elegantly and raised the gift card in her hand. So, today, let me give you a satisfactory return gift. North of the outer door area, where arena number 3 was located. Before Noah arrived at a place where he could see the ring, he could already sense an extremely strong and dangerous power while hovering in midair. A black wind that seemed to have dyed heaven and earth black kept stirring up like the turbid atmosphere, rushing back and forth. Looking at the gale that completely dyed his field of vision black, Noah's eyes flashed with a gleam. Chapter 13:28. Boz. Like the center of a chaotic storm, pitch-black turbulence swept through the air, turning into a darkness visible to the naked eye. Even the sunlight was blocked out by the black wind. In the center of this darkness, in the center of the chaotic pitch-black storm, Pest's patterned dress fluttered as she floated up and down. Her feet were half a foot off the ground as she gently floated in the air with her eyes closed. It was as if she had fallen asleep. It must be said that the scene of a sleeping petite young girl floating in the center of the violent black wind was exceptionally beautiful. If the wind surrounding Pest wasn't pitch black in color and the petite young girl's beautiful face didn't have a cold and detached expression, then it would truly be a painting. Even so, the scene of a sleeping petite young girl in the middle of the violent black wind still possessed a sense of beauty that defied morality. If it were those who were not obsessed with the strange, but only obsessed with the beautiful, perhaps, they might even involuntarily approach it, right? However, if they were to approach Pest without any preparation, they would most definitely die miserably. After all, the berserk black wind engulfing Pest was not merely an ominous color. As the demon king who controlled the Black Death, the favor Pest used was not merely to control the ominous colored wind. The pitch-black wind was completely composed of a virus called the Black Death. It was different from those chronic viruses that lay dormant in the human body and needed a period of time to settle down before they would become active. Right now, the black wind surrounding Pest was filled with the Black Death virus that could cause one's death upon contact. However, when faced with such a terrifying violent wind, Noah, who was flying in midair, actually slowly descended without the slightest hesitation. He was devoured by the violent black wind. His clothes immediately fluttered wildly under the violent wind. The deadly viruses contained within the violent wind seemed to be all-pervasive. They entered Noah's body through his skin and breathing and entered Noah's body. However, the moment those viruses entered Noah's body, they disappeared without a trace. In this sort of situation, Noah appeared as if he had entered the center of a violent storm. He slowly descended onto the stage and confronted Pest. Only at this moment did Pest slowly open her eyes. Seeing that Noah was not affected in the slightest by the Black Death's wind of death, Pest's expression became extremely ice-cold. There was even a trace of anger. Although she was the demon king who controlled the Black Death, Pest did not have the slightest favorable impression of the Black Death virus. As for why, it was because before she was reduced to the appearance of a demon king, when she was still a human, Pest had died from the corrosion of the Black Death virus. It was not only her. Pest had personally witnessed all the living beings that died from the Black Death. She had witnessed it to the point of numbness. Now that she saw a person who did not waver in the slightest even under the crazy corrosion of the Black Death virus before her, the first emotion in her heart was anger. Why did this person did not die from the Black Death virus? Why did she die from the Black Death virus? Why did everyone die from the Black Death virus? Why was he the only one who was unaffected by the Black Death? For a moment, all sorts of complicated thoughts appeared in Pest's mind. This caused the gaze with which Pest looked at Noah to become more and more angry. I knew it. You would definitely appear before me. There's nothing I can do about it. My luck has always been very good, replied Noah indifferently. In a random selection that can only rely on luck, since I strongly hope to meet you, then even the world will help me, right? This was the reason why Noah was so certain that he would be able to face Pest. With the world's protection skill, Noah would always obtain the best result when it came to matters where one could only rely on luck. Since Noah wished to face Pest, the world's protection skill would not disappoint Noah. It was precisely because in verse 16 Knights knew exactly how good Noah's luck was that he said those words. Although in verse 16 Knight still did not know about the existence of the world's protection skill, he had already guessed that Noah must have a method to increase his luck. Otherwise, Noah would not have been able to defeat Luos repeatedly in the gambling games where the winning rate was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Pest, who did not know about this, continued to float her petite body as she looked at Noah. That's fine too. Let me be the one to kill you. Pest's purpose in attacking the fire dragon birth ceremony was to subdue the talents here. However, in terms of talents, who could be more outstanding than White Yiksha? Therefore, Pest wanted to obtain White Yiksha the most. If Pest had thought of obtaining Noah in the beginning, then now, this thought had completely disappeared. After Noah shamelessly declared that he was definitely not a match for Noah, Noah's expression changed. After Noah was able to ignore the effects of the Black Death virus and stand before her in a carefree manner, because of that, Pest decided that she would kill this man who had caused her great displeasure. Although I really want to turn you into my toy. Pest raised her hand that was covered by her long sleeve and pointed at Noah. A malicious smile appeared on her face. Unfortunately, I've changed my mind. Is that so? Noah glanced at Pest. Since you've decided to change your mind, then I'll carry on your original idea. Once I've completely defeated you and made you kneel before me as the Demon King and become a servant of my community, I'll make you into a decent toy. The expression in Pest's eyes grew colder and colder. Then come and give it a try. After saying those words, an astonishing black wind exploded and spread out in all directions. At the same time, the entire town underwent an intense change. Rumble. At this moment, the entire town that was illuminated by the morning sun began to tremble violently. Whang! Pitch-black beams of light shot into the sky from every corner of the violently trembling town, shooting straight into the air. When those beams of light reached the sky, the entire sky was gradually dyed black. The palaces carved out from the realm walls were engulfed by the darkness. The enormous realm walls that extended all the way to the sky gradually disappeared without a trace. One building after another appeared to be reclaimed by the earth. First, they sank into the ground. Then, one building after another rose up from the ground and replaced them. A large number of spires turned into wooden buildings. The chandeliers that created the atmosphere of the northern district disappeared. They were replaced by pink buildings. Thus, not long after, the entire town turned into an unfamiliar environment. It was replaced by a Renaissance-style street scene. Everyone in the headquarters of the fire dragon birth ceremony saw this scene through the windows and entered a state of chaos. Jiu Yufei and Shadora, who were in the middle of a battle, were also shocked by this sudden change. 16 Knights, who was in a confrontation with Wei Shi, glanced around and forced a smile as he said, "That's right. It's finally activated." Hamel's Grimoire. Mandela once said that the community named Grim Grimoire Hamel was once led by a powerful demon king who could summon demons from as many as 200 grimoires. Will and Latine were demons related to the Pied Piper of Hamel. Since that was the case, what kind of book of sorcery did Will and Latine summon demons from? Was there a need to doubt it? But I didn't expect to summon the entire town of Hamel. 16 Knights twisted his numb arm and stared at Wei Shi, who was standing opposite him. "You guys are really something. It's useless to talk about this now, little brat." Wei Shi carried the flute on his shoulder and laughed sinisterly. "Not only did I get the divinity, but I also got the buff from Hamel's grimoire. I'm not the same as I was 3 days ago. If you don't fight with your life on the line, you will die." Ha! 16 Knights twitched the corner of his mouth, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. "Don't be so arrogant." In the next moment, the two of them disappeared on the spot. The fist and the stick collided with each other. Dong! The shocking impact shook the air. Chapter 1329. In the Fire Dragon birth ceremony's main hall, the entire space was filled with a tense atmosphere. Everyone had their mouths tightly shut, not daring to make a sound as they stared at the 4 screens floating in the air. 4 images were displayed on those 4 screens. The 4 images were the 4 groups of people fighting in the 4 arenas. As for the gift that allowed these 4 images to be displayed, it was provided by 1,000 eyes. Perhaps it was because White Yiksha, the strongest person in the hierarchy, felt embarrassed that he was unable to participate in such an important battle. That was why 1,000 Eyes decided to provide some help in this regard. Thus, even in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony's main hall, everyone could clearly see the situation of the 4 stages. Originally, the people here were without a doubt paying the most attention to the situation of the Demon King Pest stage. However, right now, everyone was attracted by the battle in the other stage. That was a battle that could only be described as violent and frightening. Every time they collided, they would give rise to astonishing shockwaves. Every time they attacked, they would give rise to a roaring atmosphere. Every time they charged, they would give rise to frightening turbulence. Every time they shouted, they would give rise to rioting noises. Reverse 16 Knights and will seem to be performing a battle that could only appear in legends. They were like demonic gods that could destroy the heavens and exterminate the earth, attacking and defending again and again. Their fists that were powerful enough to break mountains and rivers destroyed buildings one after another. Their flutes that were powerful enough to shatter the earth sent rocks flying one after another. The stage that was used as the battlefield had long been completely destroyed. However, there was no rule that limited the battlefield to the stage. Reverse 16 Knights and will attacked, defended, and dodged. They had long moved from their original location toward the east to the center of the town. Everywhere they passed, the buildings burst apart like paper. The earth seemed to have been smashed by meteorites. Rubble and crushed stones were lifted up, piling up into ruins. The battle situation could be said to be world-shaking. Seeing this scene, everyone present held their breaths. Mandela stared at 16 knights, who had an arrogant and unruly smile on his face as he repeatedly swung his fists that could shatter mountains and rivers. He smashed the half-destroyed buildings that were coming at him because of the impact before he charged at Wei Che. Mandela subconsciously tightened his grip on the hilt of the long saber at his waist. His hand was already covered in sweat. That guy, is he really human? Not only Mandela, but even Black Rabbit and Ren, who had never seen 16 knights go all out in battle, were shocked. Because Noah's brilliance was too bright, Black Rabbit and Ren's impression of 16 Knights' reversal was that although his strength was strong, his talents as an advisor and military counselor were superior to that of a combatant. So much so that even the Black Rabbit was forgotten. On the first day in the courtyard, Noah and 16 Knights had fought hand-to-hand combat to the point where both sides were injured. As for Wei Che, although he only obtained the spiritual lattice with the death of 130 children as a merit, he was estimated to be a 6-digit demon in the courtyard. However, at this moment, Wei Che's power had skyrocketed to an astonishing level. That kind of power had already shocked Black Rabbit, who had 4 types of gift armaments that simulated the level of divine lattice. Why? Ren asked with some surprise and uncertainty. Why did Wei Che become so strong? Hearing this, Black Rabbit stared at the screen and said in a deep voice. Wei Che has already obtained the divine lattice. What? Ren gasped in shock. Wei Che actually obtained the divine lattice. This was not a joke. One must know that the divine lattice was a gift that could raise the level of a species to the highest level, allowing the spiritual lattice to rise to the highest level. Letitia, who was once a demon lord, only lost her divine lattice, and her power dropped to less than 1/10 of the level. Even if some ordinary beasts obtained the divine lattice, they would instantly rise to the level of beast god or demon god. And Wei Che originally had a 6-digit power level. After obtaining the divine lattice and becoming a demon god, it was not surprising that his power rose to such a level. But, where did Wei Che's divine lattice come from? Ren's expression became uncertain. Was it given by another god? Or the demon lord of the Black Death originally had the divine lattice? Generally, divine lattices could only be given by gods. According to the level of the god, the number of divine lattices that could be given by the other party was also limited. And apart from the gods giving, if one wanted to obtain the divine lattice, they could only start from other ways. For example, in the case of Letitia's divine lattice being deprived, it was not surprising that the divine lattice was used by others. That kind of divine lattice could be taken from others, and it could also be bought or traded from others to obtain the divine lattice that had not been used yet. If it was bought, it would be at a sky-high price. After all, it was different from the materialization type of gift. The gift held by an individual was a part of the soul, and it could only be taken away if the other party was willing. Thus, one could imagine how rare the divine lattice was. After all, no one would give away a gift of the level of the divine lattice unless they had no other choice, right? Of course, there were strong and weak divine lattices, and there were naturally strong and weak divine lattices. It was said that the divine lattice given by the strongest species born as gods could instantly increase the strength of the weakest being from 7 digits to 4 digits. The divine lattice given by the weaker gods could at most increase the strength by 1 or 2 digits. Even so, to be able to obtain the divine lattice was already a rebirth. He can still fight to this extent against a demon with a divine lattice. Mandela exclaimed in admiration. It seems that the decision to let him fight was right. Mandela turned his gaze to the screen showing Shadora's arena, and his expression became grave. "TSK, I didn't expect to be tricked." Taking a closer look, Shadora was fighting a huge terracotta soldier named Strom. However, there wasn't only one Strom fighting Shadora. There were at least 10 of them. "That Strom isn't a demon at all. He's just a puppet," Black Rabbit said in a serious tone. "Wes is the incarnation of Wes River that was summoned from the real, the Pied Piper of Hamel. Latine is the rat-catcher that was summoned from the fairy tale, the Pied Piper of Hamel. Pest was able to activate Hamel's grimoire, so she must have some sort of connection with the Pied Piper of Hamel. Only Strom is a complete fake. That was why there were so many Strom puppets when there should only be one guardian. They were just puppets. Just like how Noah was able to bring Letitia and Aster into the battlefield as his own gifts, Strom was a pure puppet that was also a gift made by humans. No matter how many puppets were added to the arena, they wouldn't exceed the stipulated limit of one person. However, it was precisely because of this that the puppets were incinerated by Shadora's flames one after another. "It's just a bunch of puppets. With Shadora's power, she can easily take care of them," Ren said with relief. It would appear that the fourth arena should be an abandoned chess piece. The true trump cards are the Demon King Pest and the Godhead Prestige. "Yeah." Hey-Tu nodded heavily and shifted his gaze to another screen. "As for Latting, it's about time for her to leave." Just as Black Rabbit finished speaking, the crowd who had noticed the battle between Jiu Fei Niao and Lating started to cheer in surprise. "Deen." Amidst the roar that shook the atmosphere, a red steel fist rubbed against the air and heavily smashed into the ground. Bang! Amidst the heaven-shaking muffled explosion, the ground was directly shattered, stirring up shockwaves that spread out in all directions. "Ah!" Lating let out a miserable scream amidst the shockwaves. Like a kite with a broken string, she smashed into the ground and rolled a few times before coming to a stop. "Woo! Ah!" Lating raised her head with great difficulty. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She stared at the scene before her with an expression of disbelief. There was an enormous silhouette that blotted out the sky. Chapter 1330. Deen. Accompanied by an accentuated shout, the huge figure flashed with a red light, revealing its entire appearance in front of Lating. The huge red body was painted and designed with the sun as the foundation, and the whole body was meticulously decorated, showing an overwhelming sense of existence. The huge figure that appeared in front of Lating was a giant made of red steel. The main color of his body was red with some golden patterns. It was probably more than 10 meters tall. In front of him was an abstract painting that looked like the sun. His entire body was covered in thick steel armor. As for his arm, it was twice as thick as a human's arm. The red steel giant let out an earth-shattering roar. Its square-shaped head was decorated with an eye-like ornament, flashing a red light like a warning light. It stared closely at Lating. At this moment, Lating felt a chill crawl up her spine. Driven by such a chill, Lating squeezed out a voice with great difficulty. What is that?" This question was answered leisurely by an elegant voice. "Allah. You mean Dean." Jiu Yuanfei stood on the shoulder of the steel giant named Dean and looked down at Lating. Then, she reached out her hand and touched her own shoulder. "This is a gift from this child's community." Hearing this, Lating turned to look at Jiu Fei Niao's shoulder and widened her eyes. "Gift, gift," the elf in the pointy hat happily called out in a sing-song voice. "Community gift to flying bird that giant was given by that little guy." Lating said in disbelief. How is this possible?" It wasn't that Lating didn't believe it, but it was really difficult to give the impression that the two were related. On the other hand, there was a tiny sprite that could jump casually on the shoulder of a distant flying bird, smaller than a palm. On the other side was a steel giant that was at least 10 meters tall and had the ability to shatter the ground with a single punch. The impact alone was enough to blow Lei away. How could people link the two together? To this, Jiu Fei now nodded as if it was natural. Even ants can move objects that are several times bigger than themselves. Don't underestimate this child. Jiu Fei now smiled sweetly. Although this child's community is made up of a group of elves just like it, this Dian is their greatest masterpiece. I passed the bestowment game set up by them and obtained Dian, all for the sake of defeating you. Don't talk big. Lu Ting shouted angrily and fearfully. That Iron Man, see if I don't make it mine. With that, Lu Ting's body that was in pain and she struggled. She struggled as she struggled body, she struggled body and struggled. She put the flute in her mouth and started playing. The beautiful flute's beautiful voice, and the entire space. By a calm of Lu Ting's. The demon. 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 The demon. In Grimm's fairy tales, the reason why the flute player was called the rat catcher was that he could control rats and even children with his magic flute, causing 130 children to go missing in Grimm's fairy tales. Previously, in the exhibition hall, Lu Ting used the sound of the flute to control the rats and attack the birds. In other words, Lu Ting's flute had the ability to control people's minds. Although the steel giant named Dean was a gift from the ancient flying bird, as long as it had a consciousness, Lu Ting could control it with the sound of her flute, no matter how weak that consciousness was. Understanding this, Zhou Yuan flying bird's face turned cold. I won't let you succeed. The moment the words left his mouth, the red steel giant roared at the sky once more. Deen. With a roar, the steel giant named Dean suddenly threw a punch in Lu Ting's direction. The next moment, a scene that shocked Lei Jing happened. Just as Dean's giant arm was thrown out, the arm seemed to fly out and suddenly elongated. It was like a huge stick, withstanding the whistling atmosphere, and landed on Lu Ting's body. Bang! Along with a heavy muffled sound, this time, Lu Ting did not even have time to cry out. Her entire body was directly sent flying by the terrifying force of the punch. She landed heavily on the ground, smashing a huge hole in the ground. Pfft! Lu Ting could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The terrifying power of the punch almost shattered all the bones in Lu Ting's body in an instant. This was not a metaphor. Dean's punch could easily shatter a building. This was because it was caused by the terrifying weight of the steel on his body. Shocking weight. It also had the gift of being able to stretch and shrink freely. Lu Ting had only heard of one type of steel. Divine. Precious. Iron. Divine precious iron. If that was the case, many people might not know what kind of steel it was. However, if a weapon was mentioned, many people would know what divine precious iron was. Jingu Bang. It appeared in the famous masterpiece, Journey to the West. It was held by the main character of Journey to the West, the great sage equal to heaven, Sun Wukong. It could stretch and shrink freely, and it was the sea-stabilizing needle that weighed 13,500 pounds. This incomparably heavy sea-stabilizing divine needle was made of divine precious metal. In other words, the steel that made up Dean's body was the same as the famous sea-stabilizing needle. Don't call me despicable. Zhou Yuan Fei now pursed her lips and smiled. Not knowing the origin of the enemy is also a kind of loss of self-control. Hearing this, Lu Ting's eyes flickered slightly, and then she smiled helplessly. That's true, with a sincere smile, Lu Ting's body emitted a faint light. Finally, she turned into light particles and gradually dissipated. From Grimm's fairy tale, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, the demon incarnate of the rat catcher, exits. The second arena was successfully conquered. Win. We won. We really won. The second arena was successfully conquered. So powerful. That woman, is she really no name? She actually has such a gift, she's too powerful. In the operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, many people let out pleasantly surprised cheers. This made Black Rabbit and Wren, who were sitting in the front row, extremely excited. Miss Flying Bird is too powerful. Black Rabbit exclaimed excitedly. Where did she get such a powerful gift? That's right. Wren nodded. With the puppet made of divine precious iron as a gift, coupled with Miss Flying Bird's mighty light, the power is boundless. One must know that the famous Jingu Bang, which was also made of divine precious iron, was a genuine divine persona weapon. Although Zhou Yuan Fei Niao's Dean was not bestowed with divine persona, since it could use divine precious iron as a material, it was equivalent to meeting the requirements to become a divine persona grade gift. Furthermore, Zhou Yuan Fei Niao bestowed a simulated divine persona. Even if it was not as good as the Jingu Bang, it was still much stronger than a normal gift. Such a gift could definitely afford Zhou Yuan Fei Niao's ability, and would not become a consumable item. With it, Zhou Yuan Fei Niao had the qualifications to become the main force of a community in a true sense. Although her physical ability is only that of an ordinary person, it is indeed amazing to have such a talent. Mandela's heart was also a little shocked. Whether it's that kid or this girl, why does No Name have so many outstanding talents? At this time, Mandela remembered something. Compared to 16 nights in Zhou Yuan Fei Niao, in No Name, there was an existence that was even more illegal. Thinking of this, Mandela turned his head and looked at the screen of the third ring. However, everything that entered his eyes made Mandela cry out involuntarily. How is this possible? Mandela's cry that lost his composure suddenly attracted the attention of everyone present. Therefore, when everyone present turned their eyes to the screen of the third ring, the scene that appeared in front of everyone's eyes made everyone present sluggish. Including Black Rabbit. Including Wren. Including Letitia, who came to the corner of the hall with the help of Hiroi Hybe. Chapter 1331. Ho! With the entire arena as the center, the whistling pitch-black storm continued to engulf the entire space, causing the atmosphere to tremble. It was a very frightening sight. From a distance, it appeared as if there was an enormous pitch-black vortex enveloping the entire space. As the vortex spun frantically, it emitted an aura of death. It was likely that no one would be willing to walk into such a vortex that would lead directly to death. However, at the center of such a vortex of death where one could die upon contact, traces of dazzling golden light could be faintly seen. That was the luster flowing on the silver chains that stretched out from the wave-like golden ripples that were crisscrossing in the space, with wedges of different shapes at the front end, forming an encirclement. These silver chains, which had dazzling golden lights flowing on their surfaces, extended out from the golden ripples that resembled water waves. At this moment, they seemed to have formed an intricate network that was placed in the center of the pitch-black storm vortex. At the center of the intertwining chains in the air was a person who was hanging there. His limbs were wrapped in chains that glowed with a dazzling golden light. She was like a delicate butterfly that had fallen into a spider's web and was about to lose her life. Just like that, Pest's entire body was entangled by those chains. She was hanging at the center of the intertwining chains. Traces of paleness appeared on her delicate and beautiful face. Her breathing had also become hurried. He looked like Jesus who had been nailed to the cross. He exuded a sense of grief, but at the same time, he exuded a holy aura. Merely, as someone who was tightly bound by the chains, Pest did not feel any grief in her heart. Nor did she feel any sense of sacredness. The only thing she felt was endless disbelief. With great difficulty, Pest raised her head and looked forward. She stared intently at the figure floating not far away from her and squeezed out a voice. Impossible. Impossible. It had been almost 3 minutes since he was bound by the crisscrossing chains. During those 3 minutes, Pest had unleashed all of her abilities and squeezed out all of her strength. Yet, she was unable to break free from the shackles around her body. This was impossible. Those were the truest thoughts in Pest's heart. If one were to ask why, how could there be chains capable of binding her in this world? It wasn't that Pest was extremely confident in her strength. Instead, as an existence herself, Pest was not an existence that could be casually bound. That's because you're not a demon summoned from the Piper of Hamel by obtaining the spirit core through the death of 130 children, am I right? As if he could see through all the thoughts in Pest's heart, Noah, who was floating not far away from Pest, looked at Pest, who was tightly bound by chains and hung in midair, and spoke in a manner as if he had seen through all the thoughts in Pest's heart. From the very beginning, I had been suspicious. Since only Wessie is the true incarnation of the Wessie River from the 13th century's the Piper of Hamel, then you should be the same as Ladding, a demon summoned from the 15th century's the Piper of Hamel, right? After all, the Black Death was one of the most serious plagues in human history that spread throughout the Little Ice Age after the 14th century. This plague would cause sepsis. Black spots would appear all over the victims' bodies and they would gradually die. As for the clowns that appeared in Grimm's The Piper of Hamel, they wore spotted clothing. They were also capable of manipulating the cause of the Black Death, the existence of rats. It was precisely because of those 2 points that some scholars believe that the 130 children died from the Black Death. Regardless of whether it was spots or rats, they were all existences closely related to the Black Death. Thus, at the beginning, Noah thought that Pest was the same as Latine, a Black Death demon who was summoned from the Grimm's fairy tale, The Piper of Hamel, which appeared after the 15th century. However, if that is the case, there is a very serious question. That is, the level of spirit brought about by the death of 130 children is simply not strong enough to allow you, Pest, to become a demon king with a 5-digit number. Noah's eyes flickered slightly. Both Wessie and Ladding, who both possess the death of 130 children, are only at the 6-digit number. They are not even at the peak. As for you, you are able to become a 5-digit number. No matter how I think about it, it is impossible for you to possess the same type of spirit, right? Thinking about it this way, one cannot help but suspect whether or not you possess a spirit that is even more outstanding than the death of 130 children, so outstanding that you can become a demon king with a 5-digit number. Noah looked straight at Pest. For example, all the people who died from the Black Death from the 14th century to the 17th century when it was the most prevalent. Pest immediately bit down on her lips. Seeing this, Noah took a glance at Pest. From 1348 to 1352, the Black Death eliminated a third of Europe's population, a total of about 25 million people. In the 300 years after that, the Black Death continued to visit Europe and Asia's cities and towns unceasingly, threatening the people who managed to survive the calamity. It left behind an astonishing death rate in many cities and towns. The highest death rate was as high as 1,500 people a day. In the 18th century, the death rate reached as high as 80 million people. Thus, Demon King of the Black Death, you are not some demon who possesses the death of 130 children achievement. Instead, you are a god who possesses the death of 80 million achievement. That's right. Pest was not a demon. Instead, she was a god. She was the demon king who obtained the death of 80 million achievement and was bestowed with the position of the god of death in Hamel's Pied Piper. Her real name was Black Death Spot God. In Hamel's legacy, the clown who wore patterned clothing and the rat who was the source of the Black Death's infection, both of them possessed a common nickname during the era when the Black Death was prevalent. That is, they are the beings capable of bringing about death, the god of death. Noah looked at Pest with a smile that was not a smile. With the death of 80 million achievement, as long as Hamel's grimoire is used as a medium to summon you, you will definitely be able to smoothly ascend to the position of the god of death in Hamel's legacy and become a god. Am I right? Pest bit her lips harder and harder. Noah's deduction was completely correct. Pest was not some demon who had transformed from the Black Death. In the beginning, Pest was merely an undead that had lost her life to the Black Death. After becoming an undead, Pest began to wander aimlessly all over the world and gathered the wraiths that had also died to the Black Death. As time passed, she became the leader of a group of undead that had died to the Black Death. As the leader of this group of undead, Pest possessed the proper merit of killing 80 million people. Thus, the Demon King who had once led Grim Gimmel used Hamel's grimoire as a medium to summon Pest to the box. He had Pest ascend to the position of the god of death in Hamel's legacy. In other words, as long as Pest activated Hamel's grimoire, she would become a true god of death. From Black Death Spot Demon King to Black Death Spot God of Death. If you hadn't activated Hamel's grimoire and transformed into the Black Death Spot God of Death, perhaps you might have been able to persist for a while longer, Noah said indifferently. Unfortunately, after becoming a god, you will not be able to break free from this Enkidu. Enkidu. The god-opposing weapon that had once captured the heavenly bull that caused the world to fall into 7 years of famine. Pest's expression immediately changed. Impossible. That bestowed weapon should no longer exist. That's right. It should no longer exist. It was a god-opposing weapon recorded in humanity's oldest epic. It was a weapon used by the hero King Gilgamesh and his only close friend, Enkidu, to capture the heavenly bull. After Enkidu grew weak and died, Gilgamesh was praised as a hero by the later generations. After his life ended in the country he governed, this famous weapon disappeared into the long river of history. Thus, this weapon should no longer exist. Chapter 1332. In the past, when they were in the world of the formless moon, Noah had also told Rin Enbin and Artoria about such a thing. In all kinds of myths and legends, those that symbolized the heroic spirits themselves and were limited to the heroic spirits before their death would return to the myths in various ways after the holder passed away. Because of this, treasures like the Avalon that had been passed down from the mythological era until it was discovered by later generations were pitifully few. In fact, there were less than 5 treasures like the Avalon that had been passed down since the mythological era. This rule was also applicable in this box. For example, Perseus, who had been mentioned before. In Greek mythology, Perseus did not rise to the night sky until the end of the myth, after enjoying a peaceful life, and transformed into the constellation named Immortal Constellation. In fact, after the end of this myth, Perseus was summoned to the box without the knowledge of the world. People like Perseus, who had left in various ways in their own myths and legends, would eventually be summoned to the box court. Therefore, there were so many famous Shura gods and Buddhas in myths and legends living in the box. Among these Shura gods and Buddhas, some were born gods, which was one of the strongest species. In order to obtain the corresponding faith, they used various ways to spread their own myths and legends in the world outside the box, so that the world knew about them. There were also those who had completed feats that were comparable to myths and legends in the outside world, and obtained sufficient faith and spiritual attributes that were enough to be promoted to deities. After becoming deities, they would be summoned to the box. Gilgamesh was the latter. As a high-level demigod, when Gilgamesh left in myths and legends, he should have been summoned to the box and become a famous existence at the top of the box. However, just like how Perseus, who was also a demigod, had already died before he was summoned to the box, Gilgamesh, who was waiting for the end of his life in his own mythology, had already died. With the death of Gilgamesh, the divine weapon called Enkidu was also lost. After all, Gilgamesh did not die in the box. Instead, he followed the flow of life to the end and died in the country he ruled. And who knew which world Gilgamesh had once lived in? Where did the famous Enkidu go in this world? That was the reason why Pest felt such disbelief. However, what caused Pest to feel even more disbelief was yet to come. Seeing the expression of disbelief on Pest's face as she was firmly bound by the heavenly lock and hung in midair, Noah coldly laughed. "You're surprised? Let me show you something even more shocking." With that, Noah extended a hand toward the space beside him. Whang! A golden ripple suddenly fluctuated in the space, and a long spear was spat out. It was a long spear that was dark red in color. There wasn't only one spearhead, but it was like a fork. It was like a parallel line that was divided into two parts, forming a fork that stretched out. When the long spear was ejected from the golden ripple, Noah grasped it tightly in his hand and pointed it at Pest. Pest was able to clearly sense it. An ice-cold chill surged out from Pest's soul. Like an electric current that spread throughout her body, it instantly covered her entire body. Pest felt a true threat from that strangely shaped spear. It proved that it was a weapon that could cause enormous harm to even gods. Dark red, the body of the spear is like a fork, it can even kill gods. Pest's beautiful face immediately turned deathly pale. Could it be, oh? Have you managed to guess the true form of this spear? Noah curled his lips and smiled. That's right. A spear with a forked body is an existence that gods cannot ignore. As he said those words, Noah pointed the dark red spear in his hand at Pest. After all, the more famous a god is, the more likely it is for them to be instantly killed if they encounter this spear. The spear of Longinus. Pest shook her head absent-mindedly. Intense turmoil could be seen in her eyes. Impossible, impossible. The spear of Longinus shouldn't exist anymore. If it was said that the Enkidu, that the hero King Gilgamesh possessed was only lost, and could still be found, then the spear of Longinus should really have ceased to exist. As for why, it was because the spear had already broken into 3 sections after stabbing Jesus to death. It was said that the spear of Longinus that had broken into 3 sections had even caused the gods to fight over it in the past. In the end, the 3 sections of the spear had disappeared without a trace. And now, not only was Noah holding this famous god-slaying spear, it was even complete. How could Pest not be astonished by this? Of course, no matter how astonished she was, it would not change the fact that Noah was in possession of the spear. Regardless of whether it was the Enkidu or the spear of Longinus, they were both treasures that worked against divinity. The higher the divinity of the target, the stronger the divinity of the target. The Enkidu was a treasured artifact. The higher the divinity of the target, the greater the damage it would cause to the target. The spear of Longinus was a treasured artifact. Regardless of whether it was a god that was born as the strongest god, a god that obtained the power of faith and ascended, or even an existence like Pest who ascended to the position of a god through great achievements, as long as it was a god, even if the nature of their existence was different, the divinity that was the foundation of a god would definitely exist. As long as one possessed divinity, the higher the divinity, the more powerful these 2 treasures would be. Pest was a god that had only managed to ascend to the position of the death god through some small tricks. But even so, Pest's divinity was still much stronger than that of those higher life forms that were only demigods. Under such circumstances, the Enkidu and spear of Longinus were simply Pest's natural enemies. No. Rather, it should be said that they were the natural enemies of all gods. Unless one possessed a power that surpassed one's own divinity. Otherwise, as long as one was trapped by the Enkidu, one would not be able to break free. As long as one was pierced by the spear of Longinus, one would definitely suffer a terrifying amount of damage. Only now did Pest understand why Noah would declare that she was no match for him. Possessing this sort of cheating bestowment tool, it was simply impossible for an ordinary Azura god to be a match for Noah. Seeing the blood draining from Pest's face, Noah spoke in a pitiful and emotionless manner. "Surrender. You will not be able to defeat me." These words caused Pest's heart to tremble. She abruptly raised her head. "No. I will never surrender." Like a storm, a frantic black wind burst forth from the bound Pest's body and spread out in all directions. "I am the representative of 80 million wraiths on my back. I must make the resentment of all the people who experienced the era of death spread throughout the world. A lazy sun that brings hunger and poverty, an existence that is seeking vengeance." Pest shouted loudly. "How could I surrender here?" As Pest shouted with resentment and madness, the terrifying black wind that resembled wraiths stirred up the entire space. The black wind gathered together and turned into a pitch-black air wave. Like a surging wave, the air wave surged toward Noah. Seeing the enormous pitch-black air wave that blotted out the sky frantically surging toward him, Noah closed his eyes. Then, he abruptly opened his eyes. "In that case, allow me to bear all of your resentment." After saying those words, Noah abruptly tightened his grip on the spear in his hand. With a sidestep, he pulled the spear from his shoulder behind him. In the next second, Noah ferociously tossed the spear in his hand. Whoosh! The spear immediately turned into a dark red stream of light. It streaked through space and shot straight into the enormous pitch-black air wave surging toward him. The dark red stream of light parted the wave. The dark red stream of light parted the black air wave. In the end, like a flash of light, the light landed on Pest's body. Poochie! With a ripping sound, the spear pierced through the young girl's heart. Chapter 1333. Along with a roar, a terrifying shockwave spread wildly in the open space that had turned into ruins, causing the atmosphere to show a feeling of being distorted. The astonishing shock wave shook in the center of the open space in a ring shape, hitting the two figures in the center of the impact heavily. Immediately, the two culprits who had caused such an impact seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Their bodies were like cannonballs as they were sent flying. His fists, which had been thrown out countless times, were now flowing with traces of pain. Feeling the slight pain, 16 Knights gritted his teeth bitterly. He tried his best to turn around and let his body that was still flying upside down fall to the ground. As a result, 16 Knights' feet were heavily inserted into the ground. Carried by the terrifying force that had not been completely eliminated, he rubbed a few 100 meters long gully on the ground before gradually stabilizing his body. As soon as he stabilized himself, 16 Knights immediately raised his head. His body tensed up as he let out a wild laugh that was filled with satisfaction and battle intent. With a leap, he shot forward. On the opposite side, Wei Shi's figure finally stabilized forcibly, but his expression immediately changed. His body suddenly flashed to the side. Just at the moment when Wei Shi's figure flashed away, a fist that tore through the vast sky with a terrifying wind slammed on the ground where he stood before, shattering the entire ground. The shattered ground splashed up pieces of gravel that spread out like bullets, blotting out the sky and covering the earth as they spread to the surrounding space. That was not a metaphor. The gravel that shot violently to the surroundings indeed bounced in all directions at the speed of bullets. If an ordinary person were to be struck by the gravel at such a speed, their entire body would definitely be pierced through. Facing such a group of gravel that shot violently, Wei Shi, who was still retreating, waved the thick flute in his hand down fiercely while maintaining his figure. With a fierce aura, the flute directly smashed all the gravel that shot violently into powder. However, just at the moment when the flute in Wei Shi's hand was smashed down, a figure that burst out with the speed of the third universe suddenly appeared in front of him. The face of 16 Knights with an insolent smile was imprinted in Wei Shi's eyes. Hey hey hey. What's wrong? Is this all you got? Amidst the provocative laughter, 16 Knights Reversal's fist once again smashed towards Wei Shi's chest, bringing with it a terrifying gust of wind. Seeing that 16 Knights continued to attack relentlessly, Wei Shi, who was also not a kind man, had a murderous look in his eyes. "Don't be too arrogant. Stinky brat." The flute in his hand had just been waved down, so he couldn't withdraw it at all. Therefore, Wei Shi simply didn't dodge. Instead, he spun around and kicked out a fierce gust of wind at 16th Knights who was attacking him. In the next second, amidst two shocking muffled sounds that sounded almost at the same time, punches and kicks containing terrifying power fiercely fell on 16 Knights and Wei Shi. Go! 16 Knights and Wei Shi suddenly let out a muffled groan at the same time. Their figures once again turned into cannonballs, like arrows released from the bowstring. With a sharp piercing sound, they slammed heavily on the ground. The powerful force caused two crater-like pits to appear in this open space. And if one took a closer look, the entire open space had already been filled with pits. Even the places where there were no pits were occupied by spiderweb-like cracks. As for the surrounding buildings, they had long been turned into ruins. They were either caught in the collision between reverse 16 Knights and Wulzhe and turned into rubble, or struck when reverse 16 Knights and Wulzhe's attack missed and turned into dust. As a result, the entire area around the venue seemed to have been hit by a magnitude 10 earthquake. Only ruins were left, and it was a horrible sight to behold. 16 Knights, who stood up from the pit, spat out a mouthful of blood in his mouth. His palm trembled slightly, and he raised his head and looked forward. Wei Shi, who also stood up from the pit, coughed twice. He looked directly at 16 Knights opposite him with eyes full of fighting spirit and violence, and grinned. "You're quite capable, brat. That's my line, third-rate demon." 16 Knights involuntarily showed a satisfied smile. "So far, you're the first person who can fight with me face to face except for my little brother. Really, I've only been in the box court for a month, and I've already met 2 opponents who can fight with me. Damn it, why didn't that rabbit summon me earlier? It seems that you're very happy." Wei Shi was speechless. "I'm not happy at all, brat. I originally thought that with this power, I could easily deal with an opponent of your level. Who knew that after fighting for so long, I still couldn't take you down? This time, my master might be angry. Indeed, your strength has increased to a level that I can't help but be satisfied with." 16 Knights raised his numb hand and looked directly at Wei Shi. "After obtaining the divinity, you actually became so strong. Should I say, as expected of the demon who has the merit of killing 130 children. Oh." Wei Shi raised his eyebrows. "Can you tell that I've obtained the divinity? Should I say, this is the only possibility I can think of?" 16 Knights looked around at the surrounding ruins. "The one who activated Hamel's grimoire is that Spotted Lowly, but that Spotted Lowly isn't the demon in Hamel's Pied Piper at all. She's a higher, stronger character. If I'm not wrong, that Demon King should be the representative of the Black Death group that was summoned through Hamel's grimoire. He should be the god of death in Hamel's legacy, right? I see." Wei Shi glanced at 16 Knights. "You've already seen through it to this extent. Or rather, I've solved the puzzle to this extent. If I still can't see through it, then I'm really too weak. That little brother should have his suspicions as well. He might have seen through it earlier than me." 16 Knights spread his hands. "Thinking about it this way, since that Spotted Lowly is a god, it shouldn't be strange for her to be able to bestow 1 or 2 divinities to her subordinates, right? To be exact, my master is only capable of bestowing 1 divinity. After all, she didn't become a god through proper means. She gave off a half-baked feeling." Wei Shi straightened his back and pointed the flute in his hand at 16 Knights. "Even so, that person is still the Black Death Spot Reaper. Now that Hamel's grimoire has been activated, she is a true god. Even though she's only a 5-digit divinity, her strength is still unimaginable to those with the same number of digits. It's impossible for her to be defeated. Now that Pest had become a deity, she would definitely not lose to an existence with the same or lower number of deities as her. There was still a difference between those with the same number of digits. As a god, Pest stood at the apex of the 5-digit divinity. And now that Wei Shi had obtained the divinity, he was also a 5-digit divinity. But, unless there were 2 or more divinities, it would be impossible for them to be a match for Pest. The difference between them was that great. After all, gods were existences that surpassed the majority of species. That was the reason why Wei Shi was so confident. However, his confidence was shattered in the very next second. Rumble. The entire Hamel town started to tremble. It turned into a mirage and gradually disappeared. Seeing that, Wei Shi's expression finally changed. Oh. Hamel's grimoire has lost its effect. 16 knights laughed loudly. It would appear that the spotted loli who activated Hamel's grimoire has been defeated by little brother. Tisk. Wei Shi glared at 16 knights and roared. Since that's the case, I will kill you and obtain the victory of this game. If you want to dream, you can dream until you're in eternal slumber. 16 knights shouted. However, it is indeed time to end this, you third-rate demon. After saying those words, the two of them leaped up and charged at each other. Fists and flute were waving about for the sake of victory. The outcome of this battle was decided in the very next second. Chapter 1334. Just as the darkness outside completely faded away, the sky regained its light. The sun shone down from the horizon, restoring the entire environment of the town to its original appearance. When the huge boundary wall was restored, all the pitch-black contract documents flashed with a dazzling light. The person holding the pitch-black contract quickly took out the contract that was shining brightly. Almost everyone had the following content in their contract documents. Bestowed game name, Demon King's Arena Battle. Winner of Arena 1, 16 Knights in Reverse. Winner of Arena Number 2, Jiu Yu Fei Niao Arena 3 Victor, Noah Dole. Winner of Ring 4, Sandra Turturek. According to the rules of the game, the final winner and loser would be announced. The final winner, all participants and organizers from the 399999 Outer Sect and 40000000 Outer Sect's Realm Wall stage on the side of the participant side. Final loser, organizer, Grim Grimoire Hameln. When the contents of the contract appeared, Jiao Yufei and Shadora, who were in different positions, smiled happily. Oh! In the Operation Headquarters Hall of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, earth-shattering cheers resounded through the sky, shaking the entire space. Everyone couldn't help but hug each other. Some cried tears of joy. Some were madly overjoyed. Some people pretended to be calm. Some people rejoiced. Although their expressions were completely different, at this moment, everyone felt heartfelt joy at the Demon King's defeat. At the very least, under such circumstances, the people here did not need to obey the Grim Grimoire Hameln, let alone lose their lives. All in all, the outcome this time was undoubtedly gratifying. After all, when Pest had just started attacking, Noah and the 16 Knights reversal had stopped all of the people from Grim Grimoire Hameln. This continued until Black Rabbit started a discussion. When the game restarted, only Noah, 16 Knights in Reverse, Joyuan Flying Bird, and Shadora needed to participate. The rest of them stayed in the safe operation headquarters of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. In other words, the Demon King's game of grace this time passed without any losses. It was a miracle that no one had died in the game against the Demon King known as the Calamity. Therefore, the people here could not help but let out such loud cheers. Staying in the corner, Letitia supported Hiroyuki Haruai, who felt his body temperature gradually recede, and his heavy body began to slowly recover. This was a sign that the Black Death planted by Pest was starting to fade away. There was no better proof than this that Noah had defeated Pest. At the front of the hall, Black Rabbit also leaped forward, raising the contract document high and announcing with a smile. "Then, I announce that the winner of the gift game, Demon King's Arena Battle, is everyone present." Oh, 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 oh. Shocking cheers once again resounded throughout the entire hall, causing the ground to tremble slightly. In the corner, Haruai and Letitia looked at each other and could not help but smile. Ren and Mandela also could not hide their joy and smiled. No one noticed. In another corner of the hall, White Yiksha, who had escaped from the seal, immediately rushed to the scene. When he saw the cheering community, he could not help but smile. He opened the paper fan in his hand, which had the painting of a Valkyrie looking at each other, and covered the lower half of his face. "Although I really want to appear in front of everyone and announce the victory as the leader of the hierarchy, I have been sealed from beginning to end, and I really don't have the face to suddenly run out. Therefore, I will leave the matter of announcing the victory to Shadora." With this kind of helpless and gratified smile, Byakuya raised his head and looked at the 4 screens floating in the hall. Finally, his gaze stopped on one of them and narrowed his eyes. However, Enkidu and Longinus, that kid actually still has those things. In the box court, although there were not many gifts that could be useful to the gods, there were still some. For example, the sickle-shaped sword that Luos had that once belonged to the hero Perseus was a gift weapon that could be useful to the gods and astral spirits. However, among the few gifts that could be useful to the gods, Enkidu and Longinus were at the top of the list. The former had long been lost in the outside world with the passing of the hero King Gilgamesh. The latter was broken into 3 parts, which once caused the gods to fight over it, and finally disappeared. In other words, it was a gift that only existed in legends. Now, Noah displayed them. Originally, having more than 1,000 types of Godhead-level gift weapons is already shocking enough, but among them, there is actually such a legendary item. White Yiksha's curiosity was really piqued. "I really want to know where that brat collected all these bestowed weapons." At the same time, on a street, Noah's figure appeared here. Noah, who was walking on this street, stopped in front of a piece of stained glass after a while. Looking at this piece of stained glass, Noah extended his hand, and a wave-like golden ripple suddenly reverberated on the stained glass, covering the entire piece of stained glass. When the wave-like golden ripples disappeared, the stained glass also disappeared from its original position. "This is the last piece, right?" Noah muttered to himself with some uncertainty. "I've already recovered more than 130 pieces of stained glass, so this should be the only number, right?" Just as his voice fell, a mocking tone sounded in front of Noah. "What? Isn't this a perfect preparation for that spotted loli?" Hearing this voice, Noah turned his head and looked forward. There, 16 knights put one hand in his pocket, and the other hand was hanging limply. He leaned against the door of a building and curled his lips at Noah. "Then, what about that spotted loli?" Hearing this, Noah shrugged and said very calmly. "Already killed." "Killed?" 16 knights raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that was not a smile. "You really have the heart to do it. The resentment of 80 million dead souls isn't something that can be easily convinced by a few words and make them surrender obediently," Noah said helplessly as if he had accepted the situation. "If we don't completely defeat them, we won't be able to determine the winner, right?" "That's true." 16 knights spread his hands. "However, since you collected Hamel's grimoire, it means that Spotted Loli should still be able to come back, right?" "Who knows?" Noah said indifferently. "According to the rules of the box court, if the Demon King is defeated in the game of grace, he must belong to the victorious community. Pest is an undead to begin with. Even if she were to die again, with the power of the box court, they should still be able to summon her back, right? Of course, that was also because Noah was being lenient. After all, having her body pierced by the Longinus spear, a weapon that specifically targeted divinities, Pest, who had transformed into a god, would be annihilated along with her very existence. If he had not been lenient, Pest's soul would have already disappeared without a trace. 16 Knights, who didn't know about this, said frivolously. Then, what if the spotted lowly is unable to come back? Hearing this, Noah glanced at 16 Knights, raised his foot, and directly walked past him, walking forward. Then, Noah threw out this sentence. At that time, I'll be the one to resurrect her. After going through so much trouble to fight for so long, it was all for no name to obtain the ownership of the Black Death Spot Demon King. How could he allow Pest to escape so easily? Besides, Noah was still waiting to fulfill his promise and let Pest have a taste of being treated as a toy. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.